Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 197C, Raging Oscars Part 2. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Wayland, drnorge on the comic forums, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim, the sensei of the whatnot Segulin, and the Duke of You Know. On this episode, we're going to be continuing our Raging Oscars discussion, our best of the best of 2009. We also made this a year-end kind of summary wrap-up. What we did is we took almost every book that we could think of in the DC universe and really tried to pick out favorite issues, favorite moments, to kind of make this a comprehensive look at what was great about 2009 for all of the titles. This is a great way to catch up on some of the things that maybe we missed in 2009 that we wish we'd discussed and talked about, and hopefully give you kind of a complete wrap-up picture on what 2009 was, kind of our closing final statement on the year and going on to 2010. This will be the last part of this particular discussion, and then we're going to move on from this to a Speeding Bullets style episode that's going to be a little bit shorter, and then we're coming back with JLA Avengers. We've bumped that up a little bit because of our scheduling with Kent Hare. We're going to be recording that a little bit sooner, so that's going to be in there for episode 198 now, so we're actually bumping that up a little bit. We are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network and the League of Comic Book Podcasts. You can also hear us on Get Your Geek on Radio. GetYourGeekOnRadio.com, an online radio station committed to making geek chic. Want to talk about the Hero Initiative? That's heroinitiative.org for more information. There's a handy-dandy link on RagingBullets.com. It's a chance for us to help comic book creators from the past who are in need today of our help and support. So it's really great. I joined up for a silver membership. I'm kind of doing the rally cry to please consider even just donating the cost of a comic book periodically to the Hero Initiative. It's a great way for us to kind of help somebody out. If we're all doing that, we're all going to be supporting comic creators, and I think it's just fantastic. Our sponsors for this episode are DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com, where you can pick up over at DCBService.com the Flash #1, which is at a special discount and includes a free Flash ring. Written by Jeff Johns. Art and cover by Francis Manapul. It's a Brightest Day tie-in. This $3.99 issue is 50% off, only $1.99, and this is a great chance to jump on board this brand new miniseries that kicks off with the Secret Origin issue, but this is the first main issue of this series. I'm excited to see Barry Allen running back to his life in Central City, seeing the Rogues and what's going to be going on there. I'm excited for more Flash, so it's great to be getting this special issue coming out. That's DCBService.com, your pre-order source. Also, like I just mentioned at the beginning of this episode, in 2 shows, we're going to be discussing JLA Avengers, the trade paperback. That is the once-in-the-lifetime crossover that brought the 2 super teams together, written by Kurt Busiek and George Perez. Regularly $19.99, 47% off, only $10.59 from our friends at InStockTrades.com, and I want to thank them for supporting us. I want to thank show listener Kent Hare for suggesting this one. That's InStockTrades.com. Remember, orders of over $50 offer free shipping, and that's very cool. So thank you, InStockTrades.com and DCBService.com for your continued support of the show. Reminder about our good friend of the show, David Barron. He's got a special Twitter retweet contest this time around, so retweet the Twitter details that you can find on our show website or at his Twitter and blog. It's twitter.com/myzombies and myzombies.blogspot.com, and all those are on ragingbullets.com under David Barrett's contest, so you don't have to write those down. Just go to our website, click on them, and I've got actually a direct link to the contest deals on what you need to retweet to get his new contest winners. Every month he's going to be doing a different contest, so it's a chance for you to kind of be a part of helping David Barron to get the word out about his blog and his Twitter, and you get a chance at free prize. There's 2 entries, one for being a part of his Twitter, the other for following his blog. So make sure to do both and get those 2 entries, and check out his blog. Is amazingly cool. He's always blogging about comics that he's enjoying, showing work that he's doing, in original work. The things that you aren't seeing even on the comic pages are over there as well, and just thoughts in general on comics. So that's David Barron, and check out his contest. Jim and I are going to be attending a couple of cons, and we're actually considering attending this other one. It's Summit City Comic Con, May 22nd. It's put on by the good folks from DCB Service and InStockTrades.com. I didn't know that this is a brand new convention. I didn't know it was going to be out there, but it's really close to us. So Jim and I are considering making a little trek out to see this one. It's summitcitycomiccon.com, and there's a link on our website to that. We're also going to be at Chicago's C2E2 convention. This is the first time they're kicking this one off. It's done by Reed, who does the New York Comic Con. It's April 16th to the 18th. It's C2E2.com. Definitely check that out. We're going to be there. We're going to be in the podcast arena, kind of duking it out. So definitely come and check us out at C2E2. CGS Super Show we're also going to be attending. That's March 27th and 28th. ComicGeekSpeak.com/Super Show. And if you're going to be there, let us know. Any of these conventions that you're going to be at, we'd love to meet you. I'm definitely leaning towards possibly attending the Summit City Comic Con too, because it's a nice one-day event and it's put on by our good friends over at InStockTrades.com and DCBService.com. So and the guest list is really cool. So 3 really interesting conventions. 2 of them for sure we're attending, and I'm kind of leaning towards the third because it'll be far enough away from C2E2 that might be in nicer weather as well for us in Ohio here. So I might be considering a road trip for that one as well. So some very cool conventions coming up that we wanted to shout out, and check them out to see if they're in your area and you want to be a part of them. Jim, what kind of a podcast are we?
We are the Raging Bullets Show. We are the Raging Bullets Show. We are a spoiler podcast that covers the DCU. We are the Raging Bullets Show. We go in depth with the books on the show, with a plotline, story, twists, and whatnot, you know. So if you haven't read them, come back later so you can enjoy the show. We are a Raging Bullets Show.
My ears. I had to hear this twice, too, because it's one of the... Actually, and to your credit, you've never goofed up a spoiler warning that you've sung before. You've always done those, like, right off the cuff. I've never had to redo them or anything like that. This one was a funny one because you actually had to, and the first take of it will be on the blooper reel at the end.
The first time I ever goofed up, first time I ever met
That's
someone.
To your credit, though, that you've never had to do a redo on any of those, so I'm impressed.
Carter Hall, scientific genius from a far-off world, flies into action as Hawkman.
Jim, you want to kick off? Last time we left off, you were going to start talking about art. So do you want to kick off with some of your art picks for 2009?
Yeah, and with the art team, kind of what I did was it wasn't really an individual penciler or individual inker or individual color, because, to be honest, I'm still not comfortable with saying this person did this part of it and this person did that. I went more with art teams of the different titles. And it's funny because a lot of the titles that were listed in with my writing also are listed in with my art. And it's kind of, for me, this has been a really cool year with art teams and the writing teams just really meshing into one cohesive creative unit. You know, I'm a writer guy. I go by the written word, go by what they're saying, just kind of the overall plot of the comics, and the art has been an accentuation to it. Well, I'm seeing this time really that in a lot of my titles, it is the artwork that is just that's adding to my enjoyment for it. It's no longer just kind of like a theme or mood music for me. It really is part of the story, especially with the winning teams.
You know, it's funny that you talk about that, because I used to think of myself that way too. And I guess I don't see myself that way anymore. Just in the sense that I think one of the things that draws me to comics is the writers coming up with stories that accentuate the visual presentation brought in by the artists. I think the art is so much a part of the storytelling for me now. And I think maybe what you're talking about is the fact that you and I don't have an art background in the sense that we can't draw a decent stick figure. But I mean, I do find that because I love reading novels, but there is something I get that is drastically different from a novel than I get from a comic book. And I think there is a different kind of storytelling that is told in a comic book, and that is due to the art. Because so much of what is put into the script by the writer is geared towards the fact that there is going to be a visual presentation of what they're doing. So it's interesting to me. I used to think that way too, and I always used to say I'm more of a writing guy, but I think that's because I think I build myself that way. And I'm not saying you have to feel this way. I thought it was an interesting comment that you made, because I used to do that all the time myself. I think what I've found is, because my comfort level is I like writing. I enjoy writing myself for fun. It's more of a hobby thing for me. But I do think that because it's my comfort level, I tend to say I'm more of a writing guy, whereas in reality, what really draws me to comic is the marriage to both. If you have both of those things put together and they're done so well, I think the storytelling is so enhanced by the storytelling ideals of the artist. And you don't have to, you can still feel that, because there are people in comics who are art people who genuinely buy their comics for the art. So I'm not trying to dispute you. I think it's interesting to talk about this.
Yeah, and I'm still more of I really do consider myself more of a writer. More of the right focus and the plot line, the overall story plot line on what happens. For me, if the art just doesn't click it with me, but it's a really cool story, I can still go through it and I can still enjoy the read. It's with like these titles that I'm going to be talking about. It's not only the story I'm reading that I'm enjoying, but I'm enjoying visually. And there's a lot of them that I would reread the issues and just not read the words and just look at the pictures and just look at the story, how it unfolds, already knowing what happens, but just going through the artwork, to appreciate it.
Over the years, there have been comics that I've picked up for specifically the writer, because I was following the writer, and that's what drew me to that book. Over the years, there are comics that I've picked up specifically because I love the artist, and I'm like, wow, I know this is going to be a great visual presentation. And the art team, I'm like, wow, I know that we're going to get a lot of bang for this one. But my favorite comics, I do find that it's when it's my favorite authors, and it's my favorite art teams, and they're together because the energy and the storytelling is so perfect because both of them are meshing. I think it's why I've kind of changed my tune a little bit to being a balance of both now. I really think that I think that great writers and great artists bring the best out in each other, and I do think that's what leads to my favorite books. I bet you, too, if we looked at some of the books that you're talking about, a lot of the reason why you're enjoying the art teams is because the script writing and the storytelling marriage between the writers and the artists in those books were so high this year that it kind of blew it through the roof. So it's just been a great year of that. And you know what the funny part is? It's been a great year of diversity in art presentation, because I thought 2009 just had so many different styles that there was something for everybody. Because I do firmly feel art is, like writing as well. It's very subjective as far as what you find and what your tastes are and what you're looking for in that presentation. And I don't know, it's just kind of a cool year for this. I'm sorry, I'm kind of derailing your... I thought your conversation was just so interesting there, because I have found that and I think it's been while doing this show, my own idea on what I look for in comics, and I think it's because I've been digging so much into the art for the sake of the podcast, that I've come to really appreciate just how much the writer does to try and bring out certain storytelling in the artist, and how much the artist does to try and build a relationship with the writer and an understanding. And as these teams grow and as they work together longer, I think they get to know their own, the storytelling techniques on both sides. I think it's why I like a creative team on a book. And I think a lot of what you're going to say right here, as far as the reasons why you picked your art teams, are going to exactly be what I'm enjoying about comics right now. It's that I think editors are putting together really good creative teams across the board that I think all are meshing together and bringing out the best in each other, and we're getting something that's, I think, going to the next level. I think it's very, very cool just how much this art form is really just setting a high standard. So, go ahead with your presentation. I just think it was just a very cool introduction to this, because it just made me really think about, and I'm sure some of our listeners are on both sides of the fence or somewhere in the middle, and I just think feel free to send into our forum your own comments. Are you a writer person, art person, you mixture? Where are you at?
Cool. With the Oscars, I kept the same kind of dynamics breakdown, where I had a group action/fight sequencing, individual expressions, and/or individual combat sequencing, as well as I went with, instead of like a family dynamics that I had in writing, I went with background details, that little attention to details that we always talk about on the show. So with the group action sequencing, it was weird because I was trying to keep it to a top 3, and I really have a top 4 typish listed, and it was almost a top 5 as I was thinking for that one spot between the different Bat titles and the different Superman titles. The two different families had some really great artwork that I was enjoying, that was complementing the writing very well, and it was something I was kind of enjoying, and I decided I was going to pick just one from the representing Superman titles, and or Bat titles. Actually, single out one title, which it was a tough call because I am a Superman guy, but I went with Batman. Tony Daniel, Sandu Flores, Ian Hammond, and Jared K. Fletcher. This was just a wonderful team that just, it really, struck with me just how, the way they were drawing Dick, the way they were dealing with his fighting, how they kept that, artistic style of fighting with him where he couldn't be, constricted back down, how, Bruce was, no, he's got to be his own style. It was just that, fun flowing type deals, but it wasn't even just that. It was him dealing with the other situations around him when he was doing some of the cool the group fightings where he's taking on the various mobs, when he's dealing with, him and Damian, with him and Al, and it was just like a lot of this larger interactions that really struck me, that I was like, okay, this is, this right here, boom, going with that one. And it was, I tell you, it's part of my enjoyment of Batman over the other Bat titles, and it's actually even giving the strength to the Bat family over the Superman family for me right now.
So your favorite visual Bat title was Batman over Batman and Robin.
Yes. Oh, yeah. And it's, and here's the thing, I really enjoyed the story of Batman and Robin with just the training of Damian, him dealing with it. That had the great Jason Todd stuff going on. But this still pulled it out for me. And, I think when I talked about writing, I picked Batman over Batman and Robin. It was, and it really is this artwork. I really like how he draws Dick Grayson as Batman. It's kind of a lot of the cool stuff I liked when Jamal was drawing him as Nightwing. A lot of those same type of visuals. It's not the same exact, of course, style, but it's a lot of those same type of feelings I get when I'm reading, the title that I was getting when he was doing Nightwing. I was like, yeah, this is Dick Grayson. This is how he should flow. This is how he should fight. Yes, he is still Batman. Yes, he has to have that intensity, that intimidation, the essence of Batman, but he can't lose who he is. And I really like seeing him in the cape and cowl. It's one of the reasons when everything is said and done, I want to see Dick remain as Batman. It's, I'm now saying, you know what? I like what we got going here. We don't need to change this up. Yeah, I want to read the story. Yeah, I want to see what Bruce is doing, and I'm hoping it's going to be a really cool story when he comes back, but I don't want to lose this Batman. I like this Batman.
It's funny, when you talk about your favorite art team for your Bat books, I can echo, I agree with everything you're saying about that book. It's a gorgeous book. But I still am, I'm the opposite with you on this one, in the sense that Batman and Robin, for me, art team-wise, that Frank Quitely stuff, and just, the whole art team on that book was just visually stunning for me. And it goes back to what we were saying right at the beginning about how it's just a different taste. And it's great that there's two different Bat books that I think are both at really high quality, and yet delivering just really unique and sharp visuals that can hit both of us in two very different ways. And I was with the writing on that book. It was that edged it out. So it is funny how you and I kind of, that whole experience, I do think it was a marriage of the writing and the art for you on that book that I think did it as well. Because I do think that was, for me, it was definitely the writing and the art and the flow through with Frank Quitely and playing off of Morrison stuff, which I thought was just cool. And again, it's very interesting to talk about the Bat books because they were great this year.
Yeah, and that's another art team that is really good. It's, when I was going through these stuff, it was a tough call for me, to actually pick one of the titles. I didn't want to do a generic thing where I threw it out there saying it's this, and that, and I wanted one solid boom, and just go with that.
It is funny. I had the hardest time doing this when I was going through, because I literally, you and I, between the two of us, because we're doing a Raging Oscars, our best and the best, but we're also doing a year in review. And with each title, instead of just, like you said, just doing the generic blurting out something about the title, I tried to, with as many as I could, pick out a single issue that was a standout for me out of the 12, in most cases, that was published during the year. And that was very hard to do, because I do think the quality this year was very high. And to then go into an individual title and say, okay, I really enjoyed this book this year, but what was the standout issue? I think was also difficult. This is interesting. So please carry on. I'm enjoying this.
Next for me is Justice Society of America. Now, this one was one of those where they had a lot of different creative teams on it, and I was trying to figure out which, and I had a hard time picking which team I went with, but I finally went with the team that worked on that really cool Black Adam story arc. Jerry Ordway, Bob Wyacek, Hi-Fi Design, and Rob Lay. Oh. And part of, as I've said, my love for JSA is growing like leaps and bounds. And it's not just story. It's not just the story I'm getting. Yes, that has a huge part of it. I've really enjoyed the nature of the JSA, who they are, why they do what they do. The whatnot, if you will, behind the JSA. I love that concept. But...
Go ahead. I'm not going to even say anything.
But it is also, they've had some really wonderful art teams on this book. And this has been a very enjoyable book to read and reread and just sit back and say, yeah, this is some cool stuff here. I'm digging this. It's funny. I always feel uncomfortable talking about art because it is so subjective, and there may be people saying, "What are you talking? This is so and so should have." And it's what personally rings with me. The way I really did my Oscars, I came up with my categories, and I started thinking, what was the first couple titles that popped in my head? And then once I had these titles in my head, that's when I went back and I started pulling out my old, pulling out the issues and looking through them and picking it out. And JSA was one of those titles that I got to give it an art award, because I remember reading, just every single time reading, going, yeah, this is cool, this is cool. And the sad thing is it didn't really even win the category, because my winning one is, it's kind of two books. I've been able to pick one ultimate winner of the two, but I am, of course, referring to the Green Lantern Corps. Green Lantern just have this kind of unfair advantage when you're talking group dynamics or group artwork, because there's so many heroes pulling from it. Now, granted, JSA has a huge cast of characters, which is why these two went, kind of toe-to-toe, but I did finally go with the green team, the two green teams. And when I actually started thinking about it, I was able to actually pick a ultimate winner out of the two Green Lantern Corps, out of the two Green Lantern titles. Now, with the Green Lantern team, I do want to say that the story arc that really got me, the art team, was during the Rage of the Red Lantern stuff. And that, of course, is Evan Rice, Claire Elber, V.I. Rufino. And this was just a really cool story. I remember reading it and rereading it again. It was that bright reds, the bright greens, that popping, sensation, that look of rage on the Red Lantern's face. And it was just this really just, wow, this is some amazing stuff. And it was something that triggered in me. Now, I did say I picked a team, and I went with Green Lantern Corps. Is actually if I had to pick one title of the two, I'm going with Green Lantern Corps for the Oscar. And that, of course, I went with the Emerald Eclipse team, which was Patrick Gleason, Rebecca Buckman, and Randy Mayer, and Steve Wands. And this was one of those things where I initially kind of did the cop-out approach, where I said Green Lantern Corps, and I kept them together because I really do enjoy these visually. But I sat down, I pulled out the titles, and I read through them again, and I had them side by side next to each other. And I tell you, this was up until the last minute preparing and getting ready to do the show before I was finally able to, say, this is it. It's Green Lantern Corps. Now, of course, they're adding a third title, so I'm like, dang it. I'll make sure next year even more difficult, because I'm assuming it's probably going to be that same type of, visually beautiful artwork, because it is something with the Green Lantern. I've always had this draw to it because of the powerful colors they're using, it's that bright green accenting off of the sky space. The different, alien races, just that, kind of the weird worlds and whatnot. It's really leads towards, something that, I enjoy, and this is the kind of title that, art wise, it's something that makes me go, wow, this is really just bam, cool. And if you have an art team that can control the action and control the thing, so it's not, too meshed up, too blended together, that you really do get some magic here. And I gotta say, Green Lantern Corps teams, all of the art teams that were on here, were just stellar this year, and I really, really enjoyed it.
It's funny, when you were talking about favorite art teams for Justice Society of America, that is such a tough book for me, because one of the sincere compliments I can give to the art teams that have gone this year is I still am, but I was a huge Dale Eaglesham fan on Justice Society of America. I thought that whole art team just worked really, really well together. And that issue 26 was just a fun issue because they had some of the old art from JSA. They had Dale Eaglesham, Steven Sadowski was on, Peter Snyber, Michael Baer, Nathan Massengill, Hi-Fi Color, and John Kalitz were on there. And that was, I just thought, a very pretty book. And it was kind of a nice, for the fans who had been reading the series, a nice closure, because, we'd been with Dale Eaglesham for so long doing artwork on there. I was like, ooh, it's just so great to just have, this team coming back, but then some nods to the past teams that were on there as well. I just thought it was very pretty. And then I was worried. I'm like, is this book visually and writing-wise going to do that? And you talked about that Black Adam arc, which was really just phenomenal. I agree with you. It was just a great arc. And then it led to the new creative team being on this book. And it's been a great year visually for Justice Society of America, and that goes on to the new book as well. I would say my favorite creative team, just so much because of the history and how much I really enjoyed the visual presentation, was Dale Eaglesham and all that. But the new creative team that's on it right now is growing on me. Huge. I think things, the visual presentation. It's funny how much their artwork really matches the writer and where they're going. And I just think that there's been some interesting choices in partnerships and pairings on that book. It's been very lucky in that the art teams have really meshed well with the writers. And I don't think that always works. It just doesn't. I think there's reasons why books stand out for you. And it really is because these choices for storytelling just kind of fit. And it's a great example of that. My favorite art team for team dynamics, and when you're talking team dynamics, you're talking about the handling of multiple characters in the book, right?
Is and group actioning and that.
Because I didn't categorize mine the way that you did, but it was funny as you've been talking about this. I was trying to think to myself, what books would I put in there? My number one, obviously for team dynamics, the stuff that Nicholas Scott, Doug Hazelwood, and Jason Wright are doing over at Secret Six, it's just darn sexy to me. I love that book for its visual presentation, and it really is the handling of each of those individual characters. And when you were talking about some of your art categories, I could see myself in, when we get to some of your other categories, also nodding to that book. I didn't categorize my books the same way, so I'll talk about mine when we get down to their... actually, after you're done with your art, we'll go back to my team books, and we'll talk about some of the books that I haven't talked about from team books. But that was a very interesting category.
Oh, yeah, and it's weird because, it's sometimes... It's hard. It is really hard for me to express my emotions on artwork. And a lot of these art teams really struck an emotional chord with me that it, just endeared me to the title. And definitely getting into my next category is where I really had a strong emotional response. And I had such a hard time. With my top three titles, I want to give all three of them the Oscar, to be honest with you. And I'm trying not to do that, so I am trying to pick one thing. And the category is individual expression and or combat sequencing. Now, it's funny because two of these three, actually probably all three of them, could have very easily been in my group action dynamic sequencing as well. But it was the art team's portrayal of the individual expressions of the individual members that were there that really drew me in, or the individual one-on-one combat sequencing they had. But they had these great larger scale action as well going on. So I'm just going to jump right into it. First, I went up with Supergirl team. Jamal Igle, Keith Champagne, Nia Rufino, and Jared K. Fletcher. But I do have to acknowledge the Jamal Igle, Jonathan Siebel, Pete Pentazis, and Jared K. Fletcher team, who worked on the Gilding Day team as well. Because this is one of both those two teams. I was like, they each, that Gilding Day issue was just beautiful, beautiful artwork. And I was just like, dang, this is a really cool story, really beautiful work. But then the other team worked on throughout all of the other stuff going on. I'm like, oh, and it was a really tough call, one, to not give this the Oscar, because, Supergirl really has she's, the title is just giving me just this emotional response. And it is the artwork as well as the story. This is one of that team meshing that we talk about all the time, where the writing and the artwork just gel and they work together. And what you're seeing is what I'm seeing in my head. It's what I want to see, what I expect to see from the action. Just, her individual details on her. You see her going through all these emotional responses. Everything she's been through leading up to World of New K. Stuff going on through World of New K. Stuff with the Superwoman stuff. There's just so much going on with her that I was just like, man, it really pulled me in. And this is one of those teams. And when you see who wins this title, you'll see exactly why this came in third, which, as I said, technically, I don't know, I probably have a triple winner for this category. My number 2 spot went to the Wonder Woman team. Aaron Lopresti, Matt Ryan, Travis Lanham. It's funny because, Wonder Woman, as I said, it's a title that, multiple categories this thing could have fit in. I love seeing the group dynamics when they're whether it's dealing with the Amazons, dealing with the gorillas, dealing with the metahuman department, dealing with Edda, but it was just her individual, especially that individual fight with Genocide. Some of those one-on-one action sequences that we had there, that I was like, wow, this is just some amazing stuff. And it's emotional responses, it's anger, it's love, it's rage. It's just everything that makes Diana such a cool character, that it's, meshing. Again, I'm going to keep throwing this out a lot of times, so hopefully you all won't get bored hearing it, but it's a meshing of art and writing. This artwork with Gail Simone's writing has just made Wonder Woman just a sheer joy for me. And it's funny because I don't remember when we talked about it, but a while ago we did mention how if I was a kid, I would have a hard time admitting, that I was reading Wonder Woman because it's a female character and all that. Nowadays, I have no issues whatsoever saying that I'm reading Wonder Woman, that it's absolutely wonderful.
Do you still feel like a kid?
Well, I do feel like a kid sometimes, but I've matured in that I can say that I really love reading a book about a female. When I was a little kid, when I was in, first collecting comics back in the day, there's no way I would have ever admitted to and or probably picked up a comic book with a girl comic book, just because I was an idiot when I was younger. I fully admit that. You got that little kid, mentality, immaturity type deal going on. Now I'm more of a mature reader. It's more of a, I enjoy what I...
Or as mature as we get. I said, or as mature as we get.
Right. Well, hey, come on. I sing, into, we record, what? 37, still reading comic books, and I sing songs about comics. Yeah, I'm real mature here. But
Wait, hold on. Actually, though, I'm going to say one thing about that. I don't think being 37 and reading comic books, this is literature to me and art. Yeah. So I mean, that's, and honestly, the only reason I know you don't really think of yourself that way, but that is something I don't think there's any issue at all with it. Comic books are, to me, just as valid a medium. And they're ageless. It doesn't matter how old you are or how young you are. Comic books, can be read by anybody and should be. So I don't think that there's something where, like, there's an age limit on comic books where, like, it's somehow... I think certain people in society might think that because they don't get comic books. But comic books themselves are just as valid and mature a literary presentation as any other. So, I mean, it's kind of a... interesting thing, so I don't think that makes you immature. I think our doing this podcast does, but
You know what? I tell people I do this, and at work and various.
I'm joking too.
Total strangers that I'm walking down the street, I tell, and sometimes I get weird looks. Sometimes I get, oh, that's nice. Walk away from the nut jobby, and sometimes I do get people interested in what it's about, and so it's.
I record with you on a weekly basis, and I want to walk away from the nut jobby.
It's just because you know me well enough to know, oh, shoot.
It is funny, though. I don't think... I've got to be honest with you. I think the comic book stigma is shrinking now, though. I don't think it's as... When I was a kid... And even when we were in high school, I would say that there was more of a stigma on as far as comic books, and that's a kid's thing. I don't think that's the case in most people's perception now. I do think that there's still the ignorant few who don't know anything about comic books and don't understand the medium. But I do think that's one of the areas where comic book characters becoming so entrenched into other media, I think has opened the eyes to what comic books can be. So I don't think it has as much of a stigma as it used to. I think it's still there. I'm not saying it isn't, but it's definitely shrunk because it's not where it was when you and I were in high school.
Right.
Going back into the 80s and that type of thing. It's definitely not where it was then.
Oh yeah, and it's funny because I think I have a lot of older people that I work with, so a lot of them still do hold on to the the stigma about comic books, but when they first heard that I do this, they probably had one reaction, and the unfortunate few who ask me about comics and hear my discussion as I continue rambling and going on and on and on, they realize that there is something more to the comics than just really cool looking images.
I think libraries have been a big step in the right direction with comic books. I think the amount of presence now of comics in a library when you go there, and bookstores, I think trades in and of themselves, I think, has opened up a whole new market and a whole new eye awareness to people of comics, because it's great. I walked into Borders the other day, and the section for comics is huge. The floor space is enormous. Mm-hmm. It's as big in there, almost as big as the DVD section. I was blown away. Yeah, and I mean, it's between the manga books and DC, Marvel, and independent books, the amount of floor space devoted, the Borders that's local to me has moved their comic section because it outgrew the section that it was in. And I love seeing that. I love that I walked in there and there's this tremendous graphic novel section to browse through. And it was great. I mean, for me, it was a pure pleasure to be able to just browse through and pick up things that I'm not currently reading, that I've heard good things about, and to see them in a bookstore and be able to grab them there. I think it's great. I think it's good for comic shops too, because I think people are going to see things at Borders, then they're going to go to comic shops, and I think it just opens up a whole new market to a whole new batch of people that with the trade. And I do think the trade market has added a legitimacy to comics, because I think that there's a more of an awareness of what that product really is, and that it's not just one type of book. There's an intense amount of books. And newspapers have done that too. There's newspaper articles all the time popping up about stuff going on in comics. And it's great to see comics with commentary about comics. Our local Cleveland Plain dealer, Mike Sangiacomo, has got articles in there all the time. And it's great to read that. I really enjoy seeing, just commentary about comic books in the local paper.
It's funny you mention, the articles and things like that. Anytime the Plain Dealer has an article, I will get at least 6 or 7 of it sent to me by email or clipped out, or, hey, did you see this? Oh, really? Okay. And it's just because I'm the comic book guy. Everybody always sends me something when there's like a big story or a big article about stuff or whatnot, that I'm just like, oh, okay, yeah, thanks. And I'm like, yeah, I kind of saw that. Okay,
It was interesting though. I know you made that comment just in passing. We were joking around about our own immaturity, but it was very funny, because for myself as a fan of comics, I've been so proud of this industry and how it's kind of stamped in stomped in the face of its detractors and just said, hey, guess what? We're here and we're proud and we're a lot more than what you think we are. I think it's cool. I just really do. So it's nice to be a fan of this and just see the change in my lifetime for it. When you were talking about Wonder Woman, you made some interesting comments about how as a kid you wouldn't have picked that up. I agree with you in the sense that as a boy, I I didn't admit to people, like I read Supergirl, the old bandana Supergirl comic that was on there, The New Adventures of Supergirl, and I really enjoyed it. I liked the character. It was a lot of fun to read. She was the main character in it. I didn't read every issue, but I read a lot of it, and it was a fun series, and I probably wouldn't have admitted to people, but I wouldn't have dropped it either because I found the character fun. I didn't have the opportunity to read with every title that I grabbed to grab every single issue of them, but there were times when, we were at I remember Lawson's. We'd go to Lawson's, and my mom would say, "You want to grab a couple comics?" So I'd grab 2 or 3, and she would be kind enough to grab them for me. And I would, if Supergirl was there, because you didn't always have the luck of having every single issue there of every title. If it was there, I'd grab Supergirl sometimes. It was a cool book.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I think did it for me with female characters? Uncanny X-Men, just to talk about that book, because there were so many strong female characters. And during much of my childhood, when Cyclops wasn't leading the team, Storm was. And Storm led it most of the time that I remember growing up. So I was so used to a strong female leading character in that book that I didn't really have a stigma with myself as far as being interested in male or female characters, because I thought Claremont did such a great job with Storm and making her in Rogue and characters like that. But it was really Storm was the leader. I'm like, wow, she's the leader of the team. And she went toe-to-toe with every male character you could imagine. And
she was doing that without her powers.
Both, with and without.
Yeah.
Initially, because, I read it when she had powers before, and and then she got the Mohawk, and then had no powers, and the whole stuff with Callisto and all that. I know I'm going off on a Marvel tangent, but, a great example of a female character that was strong. So I never really had the stigma of female characters. Actually, I was reading Supergirl. I'll be honest, I was reading Supergirl before I read Uncanny X-Men and before I got into those characters. So I never really had that stigma. I don't know. You're right, though. I don't know if I was reading Wonder Woman at the time or Supergirl at the time. I don't remember going out of my way to tell friends, "Hey, did you check out the new Supergirl issue?" I agree with that comment. But I was just as interested in those characters as I was the male characters. So I think it was interesting. I do agree with your sentiments, though. Would you actually have not picked it up, though, do you think?
Yeah. Okay. I know me well enough. Back in the day, I wouldn't have picked up I didn't pick up any of the titles that was only that the female was the lead. Well, not the female, a solo female. Like, I picked up the X-Men, and I really enjoyed the Storm years. But if, I know me well enough. When I was a kid, I was a kid. Yeah.
I think the Wonder Woman TV show did it for me, too. Because the Linda Carter TV show predated probably me buying Supergirl. And I always thought that show was cool.
Well, here's the thing. I always thought the show was cool, but the people that friends at the time and family at the time and whatnot, it was always kind of goofed on. Because it was Wonder Woman. Oh, you want to be Wonder Woman? Oh, you're a girl. Kind of stuff. So I never really admitted to enjoying it as much as I did.
See, and I always had my mom who supported my flights of fancy. So the fact that I would sit there and I'd watch and enjoy Wonder Woman, she was supportive of that, and I loved it. I didn't have Wonder Woman costumes or anything, but I enjoyed watching the show.
Come on, you did.
I did.
You
I had a little lasso and a tiara and the bracelets and all that, right. No, but it was... I agree with you in the sense I don't remember us on the playground talking a whole lot about Wonder Woman, but I do remember watching and loving and enjoying the show. So you're right, there was a stigma in the sense that as a boy you didn't talk about it, but I think a lot more boys in our age group grew up watching Wonder Woman, and probably there's a portion of them that also, like me, didn't hesitate to read things like Supergirl. I didn't read Wonder Woman much growing up. I was Supergirl, I don't know what it was. I think it was because the Superman films, I got into the whole Superman mythos, and I just happened to pick up an issue of it. But I really enjoyed it. And it wasn't till the Perez run of Wonder Woman that I really, when I saw that he was going to be on art and writing, I was like, ooh, okay, I'm going to check this out. And I followed the book pretty consistently ever since Perez. And it was the artist that really kind of drew me in. So it was kind of cool.
Okay. Well, I still haven't done my Oscar for individual.
Go ahead.
Because it wasn't Wonder Woman, even though I went on the tangent. My Oscar goes to Secret 16. Nicholas Scott, Doug Hazelwood, Jason Wright, and Travis Lanham. This is same thing when I did with the writing, where it's some great group dynamics and the great action, but it's always the strength of the individual of this team that, draws me into the title. And the same thing goes with artwork. I can, in my head, just remember various facial expressions, various, just moments from the book. And it's usually, right off the top of my head, without even thinking, that just 30 seconds guards the slaves thing I did. The whole thing that locked that moment into me was the look in her eye. The way she drew Scandal when she was just staring down the guards, and that right before that one guard goes down to his knees and starts praying, the other one pulls out his cell phone and starts calling. It was that individual look, that glare on Scandal's face that I was just sitting there, and I remember reading that sequence going, wow, this is impressive. And I put down the book, and I was just sitting there just looking at that, just that one page for like minutes, just staring into her eyes, and it was just that bam. So I had to go with them for the individual. But it's funny, they could have very easily won group dynamics as well as background detail, because we talk about them enough that it's obvious that, the feelings towards Secret Six. But, this was just, Six is a title that I read through, love it, go back and read through it immediately, and I'll do the artwork scan of it. Like in a second or third read through, I'll just sit there and just look at the pictures, just look at the images, and I'm able to know the story that goes out just because the flow through. It's just a great, imagery and meshing and just, goodness that is Secret Six. And this shouldn't be a surprise to anybody because we gush enough about it, but it's boom right there.
One of the things I love about Secret Six, and there's a lot of comics that are doing this now, that are pulling off really strong visual comedy. And that's hard to do when it's a static picture. And the same thing with action sequences and combat. Comics are able to create motion where there is no motion. These characters aren't really moving, yet you get the feeling that they are and that they're really doing these things, and that is something to create that illusion. It's a commendation to the artists that are in comics nowadays, because things that art teams are doing to create, and that goes down to colors as well, because a lot of times as we found out from a lot of our friends who've come on the show to talk about this, Freddie Williams for example, there's when the colorists that you're working with, that some of the motion effects and some of the visual effects of powers and things like that, they are going to enhance when they do their work. And it's great, that kind of partnership between creative and knowing who you're working with and building that over time. And it's fun to watch a creative team after their first couple issues and how they grow throughout a run. That's why, when we're talking about JSA, it was so fun to look at issue 26 of Justice Society of America, because we had seen that creative team together not only on the new series, but we saw them also on the old series. And just to see how much they had grown over time, I really enjoyed that. It's something I enjoy about, I think, every comic book, when you get to see a good long run of a creative team and an art team, just to see how things change up over time and the series gets better. The current JSA book is a great example of that. Look how much that book has changed. I mean, the current JSA teams, I should say. How much that book has changed over time. And it's been a short time, but every issue we're seeing them try new tricks and, do new things, and because they get to know the characters more and how they want to present the characters. And that's what's fun about art. I think Secret Six, we're seeing that right now with this team that's been together since Birds of Prey, and getting to see, just how this whole creative team just brings out the best in each other. And it's fun to see that growth and development and just new tricks being added. And it's fun.
My last category. Now, this was, by the way, just my monthly titles. I do have the same categories again for the events and or limited series. But for the monthly titles, it's background, action, details, attention to detail type deal. And this was the one that I have like my number 3 spot has like a 4-way tie. And I really wanted to separate stuff, but there was just so many different titles that I love the background detail, but it didn't. I had a couple other titles that I was like, you know what?
It wouldn't be a Sensei Award show if you didn't have some category with like a 4-way tie.
Well, it's not a 4-way tie. I do have a definitive winner. Oh. It's my number 3 spot. The bat titles. You just look at any of those bat titles when they're dealing with the cave, when they're dealing with the bat with the bunker, when dealing with Batwoman's her fortress or whatever she's calling it. There's just so much little detail that goes on in the background. Whenever you have any story that takes place in Gotham City, you have background details, little stuff that just makes you go, oh, look at that, that's cool. Same thing with the Superman titles. You have this great detail that is Metropolis. Gotham and Metropolis are part of any title, for within the hands of the right creative team. And I wanted to, I can pull out details when we talk about this stuff. There's like the little background sequencing with, the contrast and the shadowing, of Gotham gives us that darker tint. With the Metropolis, you have the bright city. You have just that fun, ching, this is Metropolis, yay, kind of, environment that you get, and you see these different heroes offsetting it. The Green Lantern titles. When I talked before about just the group dynamics, well, part of a group is not losing things in the background and losing all these different characters. You have this massive fight going on. You have the one action in front. Well, you have the supplemental action going on in the background. That's something these teams have just been great at competing with and keeping locked down. And of course, Secret Six. It's one of those. We've talked multiple times just about Secret Six, how, I just minutes ago was talking about just how you get this, it's the individual invention, the individual accent of this large team dynamic. So as you're seeing the one fight, you got the little side details in the background. Some of our funniest moments we've had with Ragdoll. He hasn't been the main thing up top. He's off to the side doing a physical sight gag. So you have this one bit going on, then you got Ragdoll there. It's little side details of a cemetery plot that has interesting headstones. It's different stuff like that. That just it's the background detail. These titles just really stands out, and I wasn't going to pick one of them.
That's going to be hard in a 30-day period.
Yeah,
for a creative team, especially when you're on a team book as well. But I mean, I take that back, because even your solo titles have supporting cast and things like that. I think a team book, because you've got so many characters that are main characters, quote unquote main characters, I think that is a hard shuffling of the characters. But I think in any case, whether it's a solo title or team book, to be able to, that balance of putting in background details that bring the world to life. Because the Flash universe has had, two major cities that have had a lot of personalities that are distinctly the Flash. They're more welcoming, open. They're places you'd really... Honestly, if there's places that I would like to live in the DC universe, it'd be in a Flash book. I would really... Those worlds just seem very happy. It's like you want to live where there's a Flash, because... just seems open, friendly. There's a chance the Flash is going to run by and stop by and say hello. It's just a friendly place to be. I would love to live in Keystone or Central City. It's just kind of cool. So that would be the place to live. But, I mean, that's because of the personalities developed there. The crew developed for Nightwing when he was in New York. The development of New York and that whole museum and just that Nightwing had developed this whole sequence of using that glider throughout the city. Yeah. The atmosphere and mood that was set there of these different stations for him to use the glider effectively, that's part of developing a city and a theme and a tone. Vigilante this past year was filled with atmosphere and tone that was something that was very unique and different. It was very film noir, but it was gritty and edgy, and that took place in different locations, but there was something about... Well, I shouldn't say that. There were a lot of the main arc that we followed throughout most of the story did take place in the same area, but we did get to see him travel to different locations and things, and there was a definite tone and feel. And I do think you're right. The locations are a cast member in the story that do add mood, tone, and a feel. You're right, Metropolis, big and bustling and bursting and busy. Metropolis is very busy, and people are running around all the time. You picture people texting and just doing all these crazy things. Whether or not you actually even see those things on camera, it's a tone and a mood that's set in Metropolis that it's just very busy. A lot of people going on. It's a very big city. It's beautiful, awe-inspiring. You look up and you just see tons of everything. There's not very many parks. When you do see one, you're going to see a big Superman statue or something in it. It's that kind of place, and it's very cool that these places bring. And Gotham is scary. You don't get out of your car and walk around in Gotham. You just don't. Even in the daytime, you're going to question whether or not that's a wise move, but you certainly don't do it at nighttime because you're banking on a lot.
Yeah, I really don't know why people live in Gotham, to be honest with you, because it's maybe it's a great city, but there's just a lot of bad stuff happens in Gotham. If I was in the DCU, I think I'd probably move
to Keystone or Central City.
Actually, I'd probably move to Metropolis.
You think so? You'd like to be in the big city? I like to visit Metropolis. It's not very homey to me, though.
Well, I think I'd probably move there because of Superman. So I am.
Oh wait, no, I would do that. Well, although I really like the Flash too. So I don't know. I would. Yeah. I mean, if I'm gonna move somewhere, I'd move to where Batman lives, I guess. But that I don't know if it's worth it. I'd visit there probably.
As we think about it, I'm like, when Coast City had that whole rebirth type deal where they became the city without fear and all that, I would read about that, and I know me well. I'm like, man, yeah, I'm going out there. I'm going out to Coast City. I think I probably would chase the adventure after the city had been leveled and was being rebuilt.
Would you move when the dead people started coming out of the ground?
See, that would have ruined the city for me. That would have been like, that's what I'm like, why?
Remember the neighbor that just died? He's back. I mean, I agree with you. Your whole thing about Coast City, would you move to Coast City? I'm like, well, I probably would, because how cool, I mean, especially if a bunch of my friends were moving, like all of us moving, like, because you figure, because of what happened, property values, you'd probably get some deals to move to Coast City.
Oh, yeah.
As a because I know a lot of those cities, when they start opening up schools and stuff like that, they will give deals to teachers to move there, moving expenses and stuff like that. So I'm like, well, okay, there'd probably be a financial thing for me to go there, and how cool would that be to be in Green Lantern's town and all that? So yeah, I'd probably do it.
Yeah, but
I would move the second the dead people started coming back, because that is something where like,
okay, I'm done.
It's like 500 dead people outside. It's time to move. It's once Night of the Living Dead's in your neighborhood. I understand that they're not true zombies, but they sure look like it. I'm sure to the average person.
Yeah, close enough for government work. I'd get the heck out of there.
Yeah.
Now, all of those titles were tied for my third place spot. My number 2 spot, and I have a definitive number 2 and number 1. Number 2 goes to Power Girl team, Amanda Connor, Paul Mounts, and John J. Hill. And this is a book that is so much enjoyment for me, not just the story I'm reading, but visually, that when I first started thinking about art titles, I'm like, I gotta find it. Where am I gonna put this? Because individually speaking, it's some really cool stuff with Power Girl. There's some some of her fight sequencings when she's dealing with multiple villains. With the but she had some cool one-on-one battling and dealings with the Ultra Humanite. She had her team up with Terra. That was like this. So all these different stuff, and then I started realizing, one of my favorite parts about reading Power Girl is looking at the background stuff, looking at the little details, especially when, like, those sequences that had Dr. Midnight in there with the owl, how he was getting into little problems in the background, and you see him doing little stuff. And it was just, there's this little stuff, the little story, kind of like the comedic moments in the title that happen in the background of Power Girl. This is a book you really got to read a couple times through to notice all the little stuff and going, oh yeah, that's cool. Oh, look at that. That's kind of funny, and it's a fun, wonderful book. And it's, I don't want anyone to think when I say a fun book that it's not a serious book, because there are some really cool story arcs going on with her, and she's getting adjusted to this life and becoming, her developing her quote unquote, developing her secret identity, and or dealing with the, her life outside of being a hero.
You know what, though? Fun's not an insult, though.
No, I mean, the fact I don't want anyone to think.
No, you know what? I think nowadays it's one of the things that really irks me. When did fun become? And it has. You're right. I totally get why you were saying that. But why has saying that a book is fun and that you're picking it up because visually it's fun? Why does that become something that diminishes the value of it? To me, I agree with you. When you said fun, yes, that is one of the major reasons I pick up Power Girl. It's fun. It's a great book. You're right. There is a maturity level to it. It's a fun book. There's a serious nature to it as well. But it's darn right entertaining because it's fun. Secret Six, it's a fun book. Those are books that, fun to me, if you're not picking up some of your comics at least because they're fun, you're missing a major component to comics in that, yeah, some of it is just plain fun. I watch a lot of TV shows because they're fun, and there's nothing wrong with that. I don't think that diminishes the value of it. If anything, that's a common. I think building that strong of an emotion where a comic just makes you smile. This week's Power Girl that just came out, issue 9, talk about fun.
Oh, yeah.
But dealing with also a very serious issue. There's a stalker who's blackmailing her, and she's trying to figure out who this stalker is and what they're doing. But it led to a fun sequence of events framed in a very serious issue that she has to worry about. I love that about this book. I think it's a great book that does keep the fun balance in there, while at the same time dealing with some very serious issues that the character happens to be going through. Power Girl's a fantastic book. I didn't mean to derail where you were going with this, but it was funny. You're right. I think nowadays when you say something's fun, it's somehow you're kind of belittling it, that you're not somehow saying, oh, geez, this is a very serious book or something like that. I think doing fun and doing comedy and making it work in a book to the point where that's something that draws you in is a talent. I think it's something that it's very hard to pull off visually in comics, and I think that there are artists in comics that are doing that so well. Power Girl's a great example of this. Secret Six does it all the time. The Ragdoll stuff is just, that's nonstop fun. It makes me giddy. It's great. Tiny Titans does it every week. Billy Batson in The Magic of Shazam, talk about a very mature book that is all ages. That's a very mature, depth-filled book that is fun. And yet, pick up the amount of the density of that book and what it does in it. So, there are a lot of books that are fun that yet... It's cool. I don't know. Just when you said that comment, I just got emotionally charged from it because I'm woof. Yeah. I'm like, no, you're right. Fun, and fun is good.
Yes,
Go fun.
Very good. Now, my winner for background detail is Freddie Williams, Robin. This was, I was, trying to figure out where this title was going to fit in, and just like with Power Girl, this was a sequencing. It ended right at the end there. That last story arc. Happened at the beginning of 2009 so I knew Robin was going to be in here. Robin, he's always been, one of, my top artist, and trying to figure out where the title would fall in was a difficult call for me. And I went with the, background detail for very similar reasons with Power Girl. I do love just the individual attention to detail that we get and some of those combat sequencing. When I was talking about the stuff I loved about the Batman team, how it's going through and dealing with just that action and that flow through and that visually, active from a stationary image. I had those same type of dealings with Robin, but for me, it is going to be just those little extra effort on the Robin title with the background detail, the attention to his little stuff like the functioning belt we've talked about before, and like when he's swinging, you kind of see it give a little, and especially that last story arc, we really saw. It was a darker Tim Drake. We saw him, go through the story, where. A lot of tough stuff happened to Tim, and it did affect the way his outlook. It did affect the way he looked at life and the way he dealt with stuff. Especially thinking about that Origins and Omens issue, or backup story that we got to see, where that was just really just an accentuation of. Kind of like, I don't even want to say the fall of Tim, but he went to that really darker place, and we saw that beautiful just detailing as he was approaching the tomb with the rain effect, then inside with the lights and the shadowing playing off of each other. And that kind of stuff was just really had me going, wow.
It wasn't really, you're right, though, to a certain extent you want to acknowledge the fact that it was Tim going to a very dark place because of the fact that Dad basically, another parent died for him. And that was something where it was slowly, gradually leading him to a circumstance prior to that had led him to those situations. But he had to face his parents again in that voodoo sequence, and that was very cool. I loved the mood and tone and all that. It was just a very interesting, and it was interesting to see Freddie, because we usually see Freddie do his own color work on the covers, but it was interesting to see him color his own work. And it just got to show how different colorists bring different things out in the art. And it's fun to see that as well. It adds, to me, so much validity to what colorists do. And, whether it's the individual artist doing their own color work or a colorist doing their color work, about how that is an art form in and of itself, making those style choices as far as tones and which shade of colors to do and why you would choose those shades. It's just very cool. And I agree with you, that Origins and Omens was a very pretty sequence of events.
Oh yeah, that ending there, and just that was one of those kind of moments. Just going through all of that final story arc, that origins and almost all that, I was like, dang, this is, some cool stuff here.
I want to give a quick, this is an honorable mention shout out in your category because I didn't group mine your way. But I wanted to note something that, to me, I've read it multiple times just because I thought it was a very beautiful book. And I want to give props to Bernard Chang, Aaron Lopresti, Matt Ryan, Brad Anderson, and Camilla Tripp doing art on this one. It was the hardcover. It came out right at the kickoff of the year, Ends of the Earth, the fourth volume of the Wonder Woman series by Gail Simone. That was that fantasy story arc where with Beowulf and all that kind of stuff. I'm a huge fantasy nut. And I thought one of the cool things, it had the Queen of Fables, that it can't, it had all that, cool stuff that you expect from a Wonder Woman title. But it showed that Wonder Woman, very similar that we've seen her in space, can kind of do any kind of story. And she reacts accordingly. We got to see more of her warrior aspect in that, which I really enjoy. But she works very well in a fantasy realm. And I liked that. It was something that was unique about it. And Lopresti does a bang-up job on fantasy artwork. It's just, I've always enjoyed growing up. I've loved the Shannara books. I love Tolkien and things like that. I love fantasy literature. It's something that I continue to follow and enjoy to this day. Even some of the Dungeons and Dragons books by R.A. Salvatore. It's stuff that I get into that's just get a little different flavor. And it's great to see when comics deliver good fantasy artwork and storytelling that matches. And Wonder Woman's a character that can kind of just go anywhere, and it's fun to see how she reacts in those different worlds and respects the different cultures and tries to understand the system. And it goes back to her compassion, just being compassionate enough to take the time to listen and figure out what's going on around her and to deal with those politics and leadership roles and how she's supposed to behave. And if she doesn't behave according to those rules, how is she going to honor that system anyway? It was cool to kind of see that all come together in that, and how she had to deal with some serious anger issues that were coming about because of the world that she was in and what it was doing to her. And it was just fun. It was a great story that visually, I thought the presentation of that, and this kind of goes together with the whole art category, as a collected edition, I do find that I tend to purchase collected editions based on the artwork. That's something where I want it on like a glossier paper. And that was my theme this year. A lot of my collected editions that I purchased, it was things that I'm like, ooh, just visually, I want to see this all collected on a nice higher quality glossy paper. It actually, when I purchase it for the artwork, I get kind of irritated if it's not on that glossy paper, because most artwork, depending on the style and how it was presented, looks better on the glossy paper. Most. There's certain older work that just the glossy paper just doesn't translate well for it because of the way that coloring was done back in those days. But in today, most of the artwork does, just with a lot of the digital work that's being done now and things like that, does tend to look much better on that glossy paper, and I love seeing that presentation. Crisp, clean, it's kind of cool. So that does drive, and I just wanted to give that as an honorable mention. I collected editions this year. That was what drove a lot of my purchases, was story arcs that I thought were very visually pleasing, that had stunning stories. And the words were very much a part of that stunning presentation. It all kind of meshed together. It really was, I shouldn't just say it was just the art. It's the art and the story meshing together to make one big pop, and that was a hardcover in particular that I thought I didn't hear enough talk about it. I think it's a story that I particularly enjoyed from Wonder Woman. That it was kind of fun. So kind of cheated. Amen. Kind of cheated because the individual issues came out before then, but I'm going to cheat a little bit because the hardcover came out this year and I really liked it.
Hey, that works for me. I say go with it.
Is that it for your art categories?
Well, I do have art categories, the same categories for the events and or limited series.
Why don't we take a little breather from that then and go to my list for team books? Because I did my top 5 team books, but there's a lot of books that I picked favorite issues of, team-wise, that we can kind of go through for right now.
Cool.
The Teen Titans issues, and the reason why I picked 2 of them is because they went together. It was one story arc. It was issues 77 and 78. These were the Deathstroke issues with J.T. Cruel, where we got to see the formation of the roots of where Titans is going. Deathstroke's going to be leading this team, and we got to see him come together with his family again, particularly Rose, who, for the better part of the year, wants to kill her dad. Now all of a sudden she's finding a reason now to not do that. And circumstances have led her to band with him, I'm guessing. The way the story ended, you're not clear, but I am firmly under the opinion that we are going to see Rose in Titans, in the regular Titans book. But it was great to see her interact with Deathstroke and to see that he's in a very different place, that things have changed with him because of events of things like Blackest Night and his life throughout the year. He's had a change of tune. I like him being a gray area character, where I don't feel like he's a good guy, but I don't feel right now like he's a bad guy. But I could see circumstances driving him back to being a bad guy again. I do want to see that when the series does kick off. I want to see this played off, that Deathstroke is not like a cookie cutter, like all of a sudden, hey, I'm a hero now, yay. I don't want to see that. I like that Tattooed Man's going to be on that team, but I do think those two issues set a tone and mood that Titans is going to be a very different book. And we're going to see something very different from the Titans because of that. These are not going to be characters that are tried and true traditional heroes. We're not recapturing, because a lot of the Titans now are on Justice League. We are not trying to recapture that. We're going in a different direction because Titans was at a point where that book needs to be heavily revamped. It's been kind of in a holding pattern. I've enjoyed the single issue exploration of the Titans themselves, as kind of a prepping to them being on Justice League, which is what we were doing, kind of transition pieces. And I do like that. I like seeing how did we get from A to B, so we got that in that book. But when it really popped for me was finally seeing in 77 and 78, okay, now we're heading in a direction. Now we're starting to move. It was the prelude, very much prologue issues, but they were very well written by J.T. Cruel, who really understands, for me, the characters of the Titans. And I'm good guys, bad guys, wherever you fall in there, he understands what make these characters work. And what he's touched this year with the Titans, he's done an amazing job with. I'm excited to see what he's going to do with Green Arrow because of how well he handled Titans. So it's funny, I haven't even really seen him write a lot of Green Arrow, but I'm excited for it because of his work on Titans, and 77 and 78 were, again, issues where I enjoyed it. When I get to Justice League of America, I picked issues 34 and 35 as my favorite issues of the year. These were the Len Wein fill-in issues. And I'll tell you why I picked these issues. Again, we talked about this year was a very major transition year. These were two fun, very tight, talk about fun, very tight issues that expanded the Royal Flush Gang. I loved the hierarchy system here. I loved the battle with Roulette, how this was all, a big game, but it was a very serious game. And it added, to me, it took a gang, the Royal Flush Gang as a concept had become very silly, and they weren't very intimidating as characters, but it added the fact that they're what we've seen on the pages for the Royal Flush Gang and why we've seen different members over the year. He took like all of this and put it together and said, here's the reason why they've always got candidates in the running for those spots. And there is a hierarchy to this system, and there's a higher end to this system. It's what was done with Starro, for example, in Rebels, where we've added now another layer to something. I'm hoping what Len Wein did here is expanded and taken a step further this year. I think he laid out some groundwork to make the Royal Flush Gang a very interesting villain group. And you could take what he developed here and add another layer to it and make them very intimidating because of that. Similar to what's done with Cobra, for example. I like that DC's taking some of their villain groups and retooling them to make them interesting, unique, different, fit thematically with what they were before without throwing all of it out the window, yet adding a reason for them to step up their game in a modern world. And Len Wein did that. I thought they were two very entertaining issues that brought in some great commentary from the heroes on what was going on with Batman at the time and their reflection on it, like the whole Plastic Man tease where he's on the cover, but yet they addressed that in the book as well, and how the heroes felt about the fact that Batman wasn't there and how they felt that this team was in transition. And I think it added more anticipation for me where I needed it, because I wanted a Justice League back like what we're getting now. And I needed issues like this that made me feel like this was a transition leading to that versus just being dropped at like, okay, the team fell apart, now bang, we're back. And these are issues where I think the writer understood what he was doing in the art team. And it just was really, really fun issues for me. When I went to Titans. I don't know that I had, I was talking about Teen Titans before with 77 and 78. When I went to Titans, I don't know that I had a favorite issue of Titans. It goes back to that transition theme, and I kind of like that. Titans is a book for me, and I think I was so excited about 77 and 78. I enjoyed Titans this year. I liked a lot of the Spotlight issues. It felt like a mini-series all year for me, for the most part, in the sense that, there was an old series called Teen Titans Spotlight. I enjoyed it because each issue focused on a different character. So that's what Titans felt like this year for me, was a spotlight of each of those individual characters, which I quite liked because we got to see where they were before, where they're at now, some of their internal issues. And by the end of most of those issues, we got to see them at a point where we could see them moving to the Justice League. Cyborg was a great example of that. The Donna Troy issue I really enjoyed. The stuff with Roy I thought was fantastic. Good issues. The book wasn't blowing me away, but yet I was glad I was reading it, but it felt like a mini throughout the year, with those Spotlight issues. And that was something to me that it was a book that I think has needed a change in direction, and I'm glad to see Titans finally going to that change in direction. And Teen Titans, I think, thematically served as a prologue for this, but I didn't really have a favorite issue per se, and I did like those issues, but it did feel more miniseries-ish to me. Rebels, I so had a favorite issue. Rebels number 10. Vril Docs, welcome to the Sinestro Corps. Enough said. Bedard and crew have a space epic going on here with a larger story that you don't see often in comics nowadays. This is what I like about Wonder Woman, and I'm seeing it here as well. Dealing with the return of the mother of his child and how that affects Vril a little different than it would most. I love that it hasn't softened during the series. People follow him out of need, and knowing that his intelligence and logic make sense, but not necessarily because they like him. It adds a different team dynamic, and I'm glad that there is a connection to the larger DC universe with the Omega Men, Adam Strange, and Comet coming on board. Yet the dramatic tie to Dawnstar and Wildfire in the future. It's an interesting book. I've got a Speeding Bullets that I'm planning to do. I thought we were going to get to it on this show. I don't think we're going to do it. It'll be on our next episode. We'll do like a mini Speeding Bullets show. I want to talk about this past week's Rebels because I'm loving this series so much. And 10, just seeing him put on that ring and just how fascinated he was by the whole thing, it was, it's about time. And it was such a great moment. And I love that he didn't play by the rules. It's just, so Rebels 10, very cool. Outsiders, I don't have a favorite issue here, just as some comments, though, about a great run. Issue 23 stands out because of the Killer Croc thing. I liked that battle, but here's spinning out a battle for the cowl. Tomasi crafted an interesting team of classic outsiders. Black Lightning, Geoforce, Metamorpho, Katana, Halo, even showed us what Looker's been up to, while bringing in Creeper and Owlman. I did like how this was about a contingency plan. This team started out taking care of unfinished business for Bruce, then going after many of Arkham's inmates that escaped due to Black Mask, finally heading down their own path. It's been a cool journey respecting a legacy enough to stand by it. I mean, it's just very cool. Issue 23, as I mentioned, stands out due to that cool battle with Killer Croc. Overall, though, I really enjoyed each issue due to fantastic writing, arc, and character development. With Tomasi, just seemed to hit it out of the park on all of his books. Kudos to this team on a great run in 2009. Outsiders was extremely enjoyable to me. And it was a book that, even though, like I said, that Croc issue, but I liked the issue that, that was following it with Mr. Freeze. And I liked that this was thematically trying to catch these inmates that escaped and how they dealt with them. The battle with Killer Croc was awesome, though, because they had to deal with this tremendous power of Killer Croc and that he kept coming and coming. And how do you as a team work for that? And we saw the bit where Halo, they thought Halo was dead. And it's a great series that had just a lot of great beats throughout the year. It was edgy. This team was different than any other superhero team that was out there because they were operating on the types of missions that nobody else would touch. They got dirty, and it was a fun, enjoyable book that I really dug, and the development of it over the year was really cool. Gotham City Sirens, I just love the concept. Issue 7, that slick Grayson and Catwoman issue, the holiday special that you and I talked about on the show, I think was my favorite, but I liked the development over the year of the team of Catwoman, Harley, and Ivy, and how they were together out of, again, events of Battle for the Cowl. Gotham has changed drastically. It's not a safe place for villains. Black Mask has been dropping things in people's heads. You either have to choose one side or the other, and you're missed gang wars. And what if you don't want to be a part of that? How do you protect yourself? You've got to band together with people you trust. And trust is a loose word here. these three trust each other, but I think they also know that one could snap at any point in time, and they're all in danger. Yet they do have a loose friendship that's strong enough that they feel comfortable together. It's not easy being a villain because of that. I think we've seen this exploration in Secret Six. We're seeing it here. It's very different. I like that this feels very different than those relationships because these are Gotham's villains that are all kind of together amidst this battle for the cowl sequence. And it does show that villains are just as diverse and interesting as the heroes are. And I'm glad to see DC exploring more of its villains. Catwoman, she's one of those characters. Is she a hero? Is she a villain? Does she fall somewhere in the middle? She's a gray area, and I like that she's maintained that. I was so worried. I loved her in a solo title. I was so worried that we weren't going to get enough Catwoman, and I'm so glad that we're getting this. It's a book that I've enjoyed this year. We've had fill-in issues when Dini hasn't been writing it, and I've been enjoying the fill-in issues. It's an interesting book. The holiday issue had a lot of pop and bang. You and I talked about it on the show. It was one that kind of stood out for that. But it is something, though, I think what really worked for me this year was the exploration of the relationship of the three. And, you know, Harley's quirkiness, the whole thing she was doing with quote-unquote Bruce Wayne. You know, this is another fake Bruce Wayne running around in the DC universe. We seem to have a lot of them at the moment. But this Bruce Wayne that she was hanging out with and just, again, another example of something that was fun but didn't lose the maturity and all that. So it goes kind of back to what you were saying earlier. Great series, again, and one that I've been really enjoying. Brave and the Bold. I love Straczynski on this book. And this is another one where I'm without hesitation, I would say I've really enjoyed every issue of it because he's putting together some really quirky teams. Two of my favorites that stand out were that Batman and Brother Power, you know, the Geek, or Flash and the Blackhawk issue I thought was really cool as well, where he got sent back in time and he had to, because he was healing, he had to kind of adopt a civilian identity. And it's a hero who has to take on the role of a soldier because of circumstance and where he's at, and to stand behind these people that were helping him, and how much trouble Barry had, which anybody would, with the fact that I'm not a soldier. If I was thrust into a situation where I had to be a soldier, for me there would be a comfort level. I would have this was an example of another book where that Flash and Blackhawk issue, another example of a book where it made me respect what a soldier goes through and how as a soldier you have to adapt mentally to different situations that people like me, fortunately, because soldiers do that for me, I don't have to do that. So I applaud anybody in the armed forces that's doing this because Flash showed me what you have to deal with when you're thrust into the battlefield as a layperson. You know, yeah, he's a superhero and all that, but it's different to be a soldier, to have a gun, and to have to make those life and death decisions at that point in time because as a soldier, you need to, or else you and the people you're with could die. And it's an interesting life, and it is something that's very different, and you're making a commitment to protect people. It made me respect that, and because I was with the Flash at that point. And it'd be interesting to see if somebody maybe who was a soldier was with the Blackhawks, and they felt like Flash was hanging with them. Because for me, because I'm not a soldier, I was running with the Flash. I wonder if they were running with the Blackhawks, if anybody who's in the military was doing that when they were reading it, and maybe we read the book in a different way. But yay, Straczynski, that's a home run book. Brave and the Bold has jumped up to being, for me, just a must-read. We talk about fun books. A must-read book every month because the stories have a lot of depth to them, a lot of character. They really introduce you to... I remember as a kid growing up being so interested in Brave and the Bold and Marvel Team Up because it was a great way to get introduced to characters. Brother Power, the Geek, I had no idea who the heck that was. And I consider myself pretty savvy on the DC Universe, but this was somebody that came out of nowhere. I did, Wikipedia searches. I'm like, who is this? And I loved that issue because by the end I knew who this character was, and I want to see more of this. This is great. They're quirky, fun explorations. I've enjoyed Brave and the Bold all the way through, but this has kicked up a notch for me now. And he's doing some really crazy things with that book that I'm really enjoying. I would say, I think just from my comments here, it's pretty clear that Flash Blackhawk issue was probably my favorite because of just how I connected with the characters. But that Brother Power, the Geek, and Batman issue is easily a second for me. Superman Batman. The concept of this book for me this year was, it was great to see Clark and Bruce together, because these stories were taken kind of out of time. And I loved how it slowly moved to these stories we're seeing now, where it's echoes of events that have happened in the past. It's something where, that's actually a question I have for you. We've seen now that Superman Batman has moved to this transition of being like, our world's at war is what's currently going on in it right now. Are you reading that book right now as it's coming out, Jim, or is it...
Yeah, oh yeah.
Did you read Our World's at War? Did you read that miniseries? Or,
no,
kind of big event, I should say. How are you because I read that event, so for me it's fun to be reading the stories because it's a contained story, but it definitely is coming off of events that happened in Our World's at War. I do think you don't have to have read it, but I may be wrong because I did, so I don't know if I can clearly say it. Did you feel like you were missing something as you were reading that? Joe Casey's writing it now, and I'm enjoying it, but where were you at on it?
I didn't feel like I was missing something because it still was enjoyable read, but I did go, okay, wait, what? And what was crafted and what I was reading is enjoyable, and I was going through it, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll see how this pans out, see where this goes and whatnot. But I think there is something that I probably would enjoy the story more if I had read the original, the lead into it.
I was wondering about that because I've personally liked the transition of that because I read all of those things. I read Our World's at War. I'm curious to see where it keeps going from here and where it's going to go. Eventually when Bruce returns, are we going to go to stories that are more current? I don't know. I've been enjoying that book, though, because I've been getting, before even this Our World's at War thing and starting into these directions as far as reflecting on events, I've been enjoying having Bruce and Superman stories together again. It kind of fits to me where Legends of the Dark Knight did, just in the sense that it's great to have stories that are kind of outside of continuity, and even these, to a certain extent, are, because you don't have to be reading anything right now to be enjoying them. It's kind of a fun break.
Yeah.
But that I was wondering on that particular... I know that didn't come out in 2009, but I was wondering how you were enjoying that new direction with where it's going.
Yeah. See, it's weird because, Superman Batman is a title that I could drop. If I had to pick a title to drop, I could drop it. And I've enjoyed when I read it, and this is a prime example of something. I'm enjoying it, but it's not like knocking my socks off. It's not making me go, "Oh wow, this is amazing," partially because I didn't have any of the lead into it, so I was kind of taking it as it goes. But it's not a title that I'm like, I have to drop this. This is bad. So I enjoy reading it. I'm going to keep reading it. But if at any time, like financially reasons, or just I'm finding that I've got too much on my pull list and I got to pick a title, this is one of those titles that could get dropped. And part of it is because it is outside the universe. I enjoy that. But if I have to pick between something that's continuity in universe or something that's a little bit outside of it, I'll drop the outside.
You know what I dig about Superman Batman? And actually this kind of goes with Batman... Actually, not kind of. It definitely goes with Batman Confidential. I like those books because we get to see different creative teams every arc. And when I say different creative teams, a lot of times it's different art teams will come on. Sometimes it'll be the same writer. Sometimes it'll be, kind of the jumble of both. It seems like Joe Casey's going to be staying on Superman Batman for a while. But I'm enjoying the exploration of different art teams and different takes on the characters. Like in Batman Confidential, it was fun to see that whole Zinda arc. We got to see the Lady Blackhawk, and it was a different art team with a different look. But yet, the colorist stayed the same. And it was kind of cool to see... I think it's fun to see just a change-up and different ways of presenting a Batman story and different ways of presenting a Superman story. And because each arc takes place in different eras, even if it's the same creative team on the book, the art and the story presentation are going to change because it takes place in a different era or in a different location. And I've been enjoying seeing Superman and Batman in different places and that sensibility. So the book's working for me in that area. It is kind of funny for me. I'm with you in the sense that there's so much going on continuity-wise. Those are the books that tend to draw me in. But I need books like Superman, Batman, and Batman Confidential as kind of a breather. They kind of... and Brave and the Bold fits this category too. It's fun to read contained superhero stories where you don't have to be bogged down and all that, if that makes sense. I'm a continuity nut, so I'm with you. If I had to make cuts financially, I probably would go in those areas because of the fact that I want to follow the ongoing story of the characters, and I would make sure that I have the complete story. But there is that part of me that would have a very hard time doing that because it's fun to read a Batman story that's just a good Batman story. It's fun to read a Superman Batman story that's just a good, like this Our Worlds at War thing. It's fun to read this because it really is for me, it's a good story that is a little outside of the system right now. I don't have a Superman Batman. I'm with you. I didn't have a favorite issue per se, but I am enjoying the book. So it was kind of, and I didn't want to just pull an arbitrary issue out and say, geez, this is my favorite issue because of, that's fake. And I didn't, so I really tried when I was going through this. I'm like, okay, if I can't find a favorite issue, I'm just going to note that, but yet try to note what I'm enjoying about the series as a whole. Like, why is it still on my pull list?
Yeah, see, I did like the Blackest Night tie-in.
Oh, you're talking about with Solomon Grundy?
Yeah, I really enjoyed that one. I thought that overall story arc was a really cool, usage of Superman Batman.
Yeah, and I enjoyed that as well. I thought like the whole year I enjoyed. There just wasn't an issue that like I went, wow, this is my standout issue. It's not a book I'd drop, and that's why it's even on the list, why I'm even mentioning it. But it wasn't one where I had a standout issue where I was like, geez, this is the issue. Rebels 10, like for example, that was a no-brainer for me. So. I tried to really on this one be judicious of making sure if there was a set issue, I did note that. I never talked about one-shots, but I think I'll do that after. I know you wanted to go back to another category, so why don't you go ahead and do that? I have a list of I have a list of 9 one-shots or one-shot concepts that I wanted to talk about. That I have a top 5 in that, but I just thought they were interesting this year. We'll go back to that after your category.
Through the magic alchemy of nature's most awesome sources of energy, Ray Palmer, atomic physicist, becomes the atom.
Well, going back to artwork, and this time I'm looking at the events and/or limited series, and same categories that I had, the broad categories I had before, but just as I said, events, limited series. So starting off with the art for the group action sequencing. First up, it's Battle for Cowl. That Batman team, Tony Daniels, Sandu Flores, Ian Hammond, and Jared K. Fletcher. I think probably one of my strong enjoyments of the Batman Monthly is because it came right from this team into that. And it was that transition. And not even to knock the prior team that was working on Batman, but it was just something it clicked for me. This was, seeing, I'm going to say my Batman, with, Dick Grayson. This is that kind of clicking that it started right here with this, seeing, Tim in the cowl, seeing the twisted version of Jason Todd's version of it. It was these things. I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. I'm liking this.
What do you mean by he's your Batman?
It's just, I don't know.
Because I get your like when you said like Bart was your Flash, I get that. Right. What I agree, Dick is Batman. I think he's one of what makes him, because you grew up with Batman, so why is Dick Grayson your Batman? I'm not saying you're wrong. I actually am curious about this. I want to understand it.
If you remember, every time in the past when we've always talked about Batman, I was like, yeah, Batman's cool. I've always said, I was a Superman guy, but I always picked Robin over Batman. And I always said, I like Tim Drake over Batman. And it was just something where Batman wasn't the top of the Bat family for me. No knocking on Bruce. Some great stories, a really cool character, but there was just always something kind of held me back. Now, with this current Bat family, this current generation, Batman is the top character for me.
Okay.
Granted, Red Robin is still out there. Red Robin's coming back to the Tim that I know and really enjoy, so it's going to be a conflict. But as looking at the Bat family, Dick Grayson as Batman is the top of the Bat family. Whereas when Bruce was running it wasn't completely that. So that's what I mean by...
So you're finding you identify with this Batman more. It actually fits, the more you were talking about it, I just found it interesting that you said that. I'm like, what does that mean? Because I clearly understood it when you said Bart, because that was your relationship with him. But it kind of goes with, you've mentioned multiple times on the show that you like the idea of progression with these characters and where they can go.
Exactly.
And I do, I'm enjoying that as well. So actually, I've got to say, I agree with you. Dick Grayson's working for me as Batman. I'm very curious to see where it's going to go. Bruce is still my Batman, but Dick Grayson's a strong contender. It would be one, like, if this was a presidential race right now between the two, I would have a very tough time deciding who would be president. Because both of them are running a heck of a campaign. So it is something that, for me, I totally get where you're going with it. I just thought it was interesting that you said that. That was that's kind of cool.
Vote change, man. Vote for the future.
I know you didn't vote change, though.
Well, hey, I am now.
All right, there you go.
Well,
you're fun.
Next up, World of New Krypton. Yeah, and there were multiple teams on this, and I want to give full credit to all of them. Pete Woods, Brad Anderson, Steve Wantz, D.I. Rufino, Ron Randall, Pete Pentazis. This was just a really enjoyable series. Story was really cool, but I really loved seeing that world of New Krypton, seeing just what was going on in this, new cultural, new, completely dynamics. Even though I'm a Superman guy, I really don't have the lengthy history and knowledge of what Krypton was like. All those prior stories that came out about, life on Krypton and the various Elseworld stories, I've never really read them. So this is my exposure to Kryptonian culture. So this was a really neat thing for me to see it get fleshed out. And it was another just beautiful title that I was like, man, had this been a normal year, this would have won hands down for me without hesitation or second of regret, because it's just when you're developing this alien world, it was kind of the same stuff that I was raging about with the Green Lantern titles. You have this foreign world that is just exotic, going, ooh, what's this? What's this? Oh, wow. And I had those kind of moments with World of New Krypton. And it was just a true enjoyment of word as well as imagery. Now, it did get beat, and it got beat by...
Wait, can I say something about World of New Krypton, though? One of the things that I've loved about World of New Krypton has been the exploration of just lore of Krypton. And just kind of, I feel like this culture to me has a life to it and a history and a longevity to it that I think has come alive to me in a way. I remember as a kid reading, I'd pick up back issues of the Silver Age stuff, and it was great to kind of see, the visits to Kandor and to get all that. We haven't had as much of that in recent years. And I think it's kind of fun to kind of go back to that exploration and kind of enhance it and expand it with the guilds and everything. It's just, World of New Krypton to me has been very enjoyable. It's another Speeding Bullets actually I want to do on our next part. I want to talk about World of New Krypton number 12 and how that ended. I love that it made a villain like Zod sympathetic. Like, there were motivations of Zod I understood. I really adored in that series, visually, as well as in the writing. I mean, he's one of those characters that I'm like, ooh, still a bad guy. Still, I want to see Superman pound on him, but yet I get him.
Understand him.
Yeah, and there was a consistency to who the villain is and how he worked as kind of a in many ways there were times where he was Clark's buddy cop, where Clark was actually going to him and he was able to get advice from Zod because you can pull off the intellect and experience of the man. And that shows Clark as the kind of character Clark is, in the sense of recognizing, okay, yeah, this guy's my enemy, but there are things he can offer here that I need and that I can trust. And that's, and because we have this common goal of wanting a future for New Krypton. We care about the people. We want to see this work. We want to see it survive. Where it ultimately goes, we might have different ideas on. But right now, our common goal of survival and making this culture work is, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And they're kind of in that moment. And their enemy a lot of time is the political system of New Krypton. And I loved that was something that was living and breathing and backwards in many ways and needed growth and change. And in many ways enabled a lot of the direction that New Krypton has gone in as the series has progressed towards its finale. And it's one of those things where 12 issues was definitely needed for this. We needed to see this deep exploration, this deep build, get to know the different factions and why, in order to understand how certain things were happening in this building murder mystery that started coming about, and how that was just not a throwaway thing. It's playing into a very deep problem that New Krypton is going to have to face because its own people have kind of set it up. And I loved it. It was a great miniseries. I'm glad you noted it because it's a cool book.
Oh yeah. And now the as I said, World of New Krypton would have won if it had been a normal year, but it's not a normal year. It's the year of Blackest Night, and that's my Oscar for group action sequencing. Even Rice, Eau Claire Albert, Alex Sinclair, Nick J. Napolitano. I've multiple times we've been gushing about this title. When we do our segments, you hear me just raving about just what is the action, what is the back, everything about it. That I'm just like, wow, this has been for me what I want the events to look like, how I want them to be structured. This is for me is the perfect event going on. So it's been winning a lot, and it's going to continue to win tonight. Next, going on with individual expressions and or combat sequencing. First up is Flash Rebirth. Ethan Van Sciver, Alex Sinclair, and Rob Leigh. When when Flash Rebirth first came out, I was a little bit confused what was going on. I still didn't know who Barry was. I still didn't get the groove of the story being told. But it was always the art that really kept me into it. I really enjoyed what I was seeing. I thought it was some beautiful stuff. I was like, okay, yeah, let's see where this goes. And then once I started getting the groove, once I started getting the jive of who Barry is and really started liking the character, that artwork just exploded on me. And I was like, wow, this is just some fun stuff. And I was really just digging what I was reading, just going through. And it was once again, that accentuation that the artwork gives to a cool story that, I was really loving what I was seeing, loving what I was reading. And boom, this was, one of those things that added to my enjoyment of, Blackest Night with the Flash, understanding Barry, just that connection between the two, though, seeing this guy who I was like, yeah, this is somebody I want to follow this story. I want to read, the Flash Monthly series now. I want to learn more about Barry, maybe even pick up some back issues, pick up some prior trades, and just seeing who this guy is. It's, definitely just a wow kind of stuff that I was enjoying.
The Flash world for me has always been about accessibility, has always been about, there's few comic worlds where you feel like I could really live there, and I would want to live there. The Flash world kind of gives you the hope. He's like a hero's hero, and this is true with Wally as well. And I love that thematically we're getting back to what makes the Flash concept cool. There's hope there, and it's funny that Barry, it's not an accident that Barry gets that ring. It's this sense of joy and excitement and being a hero, and it makes you, as a kid, you wanted to put on a cape, run around, and be a superhero because you wanted people to get that hope from you, and there's something about saying that you generate that Barry Allen there's something classic about him. Wally carried on that legacy, and I think that's why his book just got so many legions of fans. It's kind of like how Kyle took over for Hal, and that worked. Wally did the same thing for Barry, and bringing Barry back and getting him back to those roots. I do think it's one of the strengths of this miniseries. It was a ballsy move in the sense that what they did was Barry in the beginning was in that transition place where he didn't know where he belonged. He was disenfranchised. It was in a very dark place where he's like, I don't know why I belong here. I don't know if I do. And I don't know how to reconnect with people because the world's kind of moved on without me, and I don't know what my place is in it. And I think we've all been in a place where we don't know where our place is in the world, and we were all pretty unlikable at that time. You know what I mean? I've been there before. I think what ends up happening, though, is we get to see Barry's growth into this person where he starts to learn what his role is and where, he gets his smile back, and we get to see him be the hero again and understand his legacy and his role and where he is and what his importance is, and his connections with Bart during this and Wally and just there's something special about this book. It's growing and it sets up a lot of beats where I want to see more of him with Bart. How will they grow together because they don't know each other? And Bart's heard nothing but stories about Barry, but that's not a relationship. And to get that relationship developed, there's so much to do with the Flash family. And Wally, where's Wally going to be in all this? I'm into Barry, and Barry's gotten interesting to me again. He's likable, which I wasn't sure how I was going to feel being a Wally nut, and I'm into it. I'm the first issue of Flash. I can't wait for that Secret Files and Origins issue. That's kind of like the Zero issue that we're going to get first, and then Flash #1 where we get the free ring. I'm in. I mean, this is very cool. So, good choice for Flash.
My number 2, in there, probably the biggest surprise that it's in my top 3 is the fact that it didn't win. And I'm talking Blackest Night. This, I've been so Blackest Night crazy and so gushing about it that when I started picking like individual expressions, I loved just seeing these details. I loved, I've talked multiple times about this, just how the look on the different heroes' faces as they're dealing with the tragedy, as they're rising up, as they're being the heroes that they are. These are some great stuff, but there was a limited series that had, more, I want to say, giddy moments, more hoorah moments for me, more times when I was like, thank you, this is what I want to see. And that's actually my winner. And my winner goes to Superman Secret Origins. Gary Frank, Jonathan Siebel, Brad Anderson, Steve Wands. There are just some classic, iconic moments in this series that I absolutely love. It's, not only just a story that's being told, we're seeing this because it's technically, it is a new story, but it's a lot of the elements of stuff we've seen before. We're getting a little extra edge to it, a little bit of extra information, but it is the visual process that I'm going through with this that really has me going, yay! And just, the looks of Clark's faces, the dealings with the different individual people, some of the cool stuff with it Lois is going through, but it's, I don't know. There's been so many times whenever I've read this, whenever we've talked about it, that I just had that yay, geeky, giggly kind of moments that this had to be my Oscar for just the individual expression and just the iconic imagery and just what is, the what that I wanted from this secret origin, Superman Secret Origin story. This is exactly how I wanted it to look. I love just the look and feel of everything that's going on there.
I love that you just said it's the what that you wanted. I'm sorry.
I get that. I didn't say the whatnot.
I get that way too. When you're trying to collect your thoughts and come up with that, but sometimes you'll say things and I'm just so fascinated because it's clear that you didn't realize you just said it, but because I'm listening to you so intently, I do, and it just cracks me up. There's one book when you're talking about limited series. I know you got another category, right?
Yeah, I got the background details.
Okay. Before you go to that, I know you don't have this anywhere in your list, but I think when we talk about art, if there's something, and I don't want to call this an honorable mention, it's something that I really want to note that I thought was a great series that came out this year, Wednesday's Comics. The artwork in that and the sheer amount of very cool artwork throughout the entire series. I loved that every page was a visual treat. I loved seeing that on the oversized paper. Because it was done obviously in the newsprint, but the artists had a canvas to do something different, and each piece had a visual presentation that was unique to the format, where you turn the page and it was a very different style and presentation. I loved that, and I just want to commend all of the art teams who worked on Wednesday's Comics, because I love experimental comics. I love DC's Solo series for its one-shot spotlights of different artists and at times different writers, but to me, Solo was a great example of experimentation. This is a great example of experimentation in comics where you're doing something, hey, let's play with this. Newsprint and doing like these big, oversized things. We haven't done this kind of thing in a while. Let's try this and see what artists do with it, and let's do this. You got one page, what are you going to do with it? And they did that, and they did it for 12 weeks, and it was just a pure visual joy every single week. I want to see another one, but not only do I want to see another Wednesday's Comics, I would love to see in 2010 just more experimentation and exploration. Wednesday's Comics worked because it was different, and, it took some old concepts and brought them in, but the artists took that one big page that they had and played with it and had fun, and we were the ones that got the treat because of it. And I think got people talking, and it got people into shops every week. It was fun. It was just a good read, and I want to see more experimentation in 2010. Play with this medium, because comics are cutting edge. And it's one of those things we talked about before. Is there validity or maturity in comics? It's why every year it's worth being a fan of this medium, because there are people in this medium, whether you're on the biggest selling book or the lowest selling title. There's something magical about comics where everybody who's in it wants to try and do something. I think the talent pool in comics right now is insane. whether, and I'm talking about DC, Marvel, Independence, across whatever you're working for, the amount of people that are just doing really creative, fun things with this medium and just showing that these pages that you can go through every month, you can do anything in them. And I love that, a book like The Shield, for example, I was reading that today. I love that artists will play around with our traditional concept of panels and change the sizes and shapes and how they're presented on a page to tell a story in a different manner that fits the visual that fits the storytelling style of what's being told there. I just think in Wednesday's Comics, I think, to me, is the epitome of thank you to anybody who's worked in comics this year, because Wednesday's Comics is a great example of what you do every month for us. I think we see it on a smaller scale in regular monthly titles, but Wednesday's Comics was totally embracing and celebrating the experimental nature of comics. And I think it's something it's why 2009 I loved reading comics. It's why in 2010 I'm giddy to continue doing it. And this is a legitimate art form that I just think is just knocking my socks off. And Wednesday's Comics is like the figure masthead of what's great about artwork in comics. Sorry, I know. I just knew we weren't going to really get to that in a category. And I don't know what category you'd even put that in. It's kind of its own category.
Yeah, and it's funny because last time when we were talking about this, I completely forgot to include Wednesday's Comics in my stuff, and it got me thinking. With me, I enjoyed it. I probably didn't enjoy it as much as you did. I did enjoy reading. I thought it was kind of a neat thing. I ordered the collected. I'm going to get those, and I'm really looking forward to seeing that collected. But for me, because I am such a strong story person, the artwork and just the fact that they did that whole brand new thing, I want to say was kind of lost on me a little bit, because it's funny hearing you just talk about how they tried something new and it's something different, and I was like, yeah, and as you're talking, I'm agreeing with you. Yeah, that is kind of neat, and it was something that just really I kind of like overlooked when Wednesday's comic came out. I didn't think of it as just how, iconic and how different this is to try something brand new, even though it's not really new. It's going back old school, if you will, kind of deal, going back with the old newspaper, print paper, that kind of stuff. But it is that large, story spread out and that.
And it was different in the sense that it's what you do with the page. And that's where I think that we really saw some cutting-edge things, because each story, there was nothing cookie-cutter about any one of those stories. Every single one of them was unique, different. The artists really played with it. They stuck to the roots of what makes the characters cool, yet at the same time, and they were really identifiable what was cool about those characters. But, I mean, if you take a look at the way Wonder Woman was told, and then compare it to the way Superman was told, and then Supergirl and stuff like that, each of those stories were so vastly different in tone, and even the kind of emotional reaction and response you get from them. Batman was that, long threaded murder mystery that you were kind of going through going on this ride and with Azzarello and Rizzo. And I mean, just the Green Lantern story was very much this kind of, we actually saw Hal out of costume a lot in the early parts in the story development. And then it got into this, kind of a big history of Hal as a space jockey, and, where that all went, test pilot kind of thing. That kind of went down. It's fun to just kind of see each individual story. Adam Strange, I thought, was very cool, and Commandy. I mean, just every single story had something that was hooking me in, and Metal Men and all that stuff. It was really fun to kind of read Wednesday's Comics. And Metamorpho, I loved the game board, and I loved that from issue to issue, Metamorpho was really doing a lot of fun things with playing around with how that was Michael Allred, and the Neil Gaiman story, and just they were playing around with how you can use a whole page to tell a story. There were times where Metamorpho was the same figure all the way through, kind of zifting through the whole thing, in a way that it was cool. I liked it when the other Metamorpho girl got involved in the whole thing, and they had to go through that kind of Indiana Jones type trap system where they thought Metamorpho died, and they had to keep changing into different kinds of elements in order to get through the system. it was just unique storytelling the visual storytelling on that whole thing to me was the key, and that's what stood out, and that's why I think it deserves its own praise as an experimental artistic category, and I think it's a nod to what comics does. And I could go on talking about Wednesday's comics forever, so I'll stop there and just say that Wednesday's comics to me was, I needed to note it on both shows because I think it's something that was just stunning and stellar, and I'm proud that I picked it up, and I'm with you. I bought the collected edition because it's something that I'm going to see myself referring to time and again. And it is something to me that I think is a neat coffee table book for people, just to leave out for people to page through. Students in my classroom do that all the time. They'll page through different comics that I've got in the classroom in, of trade-bound form. Sometimes they're paging through to read it. Other times they're paging through to look at it. And it's a little bit of both. And I think comics are great because you can approach reading a comic in so many different ways depending on your mood at the time. And Wednesday's Comics is one of those. If you want to introduce people to comics, leave it on your table. Let people page through it. It's cool. It's kind of a cool way to, I think that's going to be something that's going to be neat about a collected edition of this.
Yeah,
it's a great entry point.
Yeah, that actually would make a good coffee table book. Cool. Next category I had with the background details and all that. And it's funny, when we talked with writing the Final Crisis Aftermath stuff with Run and Tattoo, I had those two were my two really big favorite ones. And I was like, because the characters were developed in it. It was just this fun action. It was I love Tattoo.
Did you say Run and Tattoo?
What?
Did you say Run and Tattoo?
Yes, I said Run and Tattoo.
You meant Run and Ink.
Run and Ink.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Boss, the plane. Final Crisis Tattoo.
The plane.
It's the search for Mr. Rourke. Welcome to Fantasy Island in the DC Universe. I actually would read that.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking some Where's Whatnot Nows. I know you'll be Mr. Rourke and I'll be Tattoo.
Oh, that would be nice, actually. I would enjoy that. Yeah.
Okay. But Final Crisis Inc. and Final Crisis Run. And these are two great stories. And it was when I was looking at them, the one that kind of edged out over them was Final Crisis Run. And part of it was with the artwork going on, that theme of he was constantly scrambling and he was constantly going. It was that constant motion, and he just had to keep going. He couldn't slow down. He couldn't settle. But then just looking at if you think about some of the funny sequencing, like when the one dude who was dressed up in the Burger Cow outfit when he catches on fire and they show him running around, and when the look on those little puppies when they go psycho, and then the look as they're getting thrown off the ledge going it was just some that kind of background sequencing going through with just this despicable person, and I was just kept me going and kept me enjoying it. And it was the rereadability of Run with these little stuff in the background, seeing the different, the fact that the one bank was the Wayne savings, and just, when he got it with his little, squad, I don't even remember if they ever actually had an official name, but that one short-lived team up that he had, with seeing the different characters and this how they were presented. This was definitely some cool stuff with this, and this would have been, once again, had this been a normal year, this would have been an Oscar contention very easily. So that's why I had to put it in the top 3, but it went up against some just classic iconic images, and probably in my history the largest event I've ever really dealt with. So it got a third place nod, and it was definitely something worthy of a win. And if you didn't read Final Crisis Aftermath Run or Inc. because you didn't like Final Crisis, these are things you may want to pick up just because these were good stories. And yeah, they played off of events that happened initially in Final Crisis, but they did take these characters in a whole nother place that was really enjoyable.
They really were contained.
Visually, yeah.
Like Run, for example, realistically, the start of the story, and straight on through, it deals with a guy, like, in the aftermath. It really is the aftermath, in the sense that it's a complete contained story from start to finish. It reminds me a lot of the movie Run, Lola, Run. Just kind of...
Yeah.
And, I mean, I don't mean in the sense that it's a cookie cutter of that movie, but it's that kind of... fast paced, ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's on the run from the heroes. He's on the run from the villains he's double-crossed. So it really is a villain who is in this place because he screwed over so many people that, and he winds up in this little group of friends of basically misfit villains that they're all there because nobody wants them in their big group. And that leads somebody who's just a little bit better to them to take advantage of their own misfortune. It's an interesting story, and it's a character who he starts off incredibly unlikable, yet you can't take your eyes off him. And that's the best way to put it, because to this day, I still want to beat the guy up, but yet if you told me there was going to be Final Crisis Aftermath Run 2, I would pick it up in an instant because I love following the guy. Yeah. He could be a reality TV star in an instant. Because there is something, you don't know why you want to follow him or why you want to watch him, but you do.
He's that great train wreck that you
That's
can't
a perfect
turn your eyes away from.
Yeah. So it was just one of those miniseries that for me, and a great example of, this is the team now we're seeing on JSA All-Stars, and why are we seeing them there? Because they meshed so well together on this mini. It was fun. That's another one. It was fun. It was fun, enjoyable, and you feel weird saying you actually liked Mike, but I did like Mike during it. I liked following Mike, at least. I'd be embarrassed to say I know him.
Do you want to be like Mike?
I don't want to be like Mike.
Okay.
I think I have friends, though, who kind of fall into the Mike category. Everybody does.
Yeah.
They're that friend that you're friends with, and you wouldn't ever stop being friends with that person, but yet you're like embarrassed to tell people you like know that person, and your other friends don't know why you hang out with Mike. You know what I mean? It's one of those type of people. Does that make sense?
You're not thinking in your head substituting Jim for Mike, are you?
No.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah. No, you're one of the good folk.
Oh, okay, cool.
I wouldn't do a podcast with Mike. We might have Mike guest star for an episode because we'd have fun with Mike, but I couldn't do this with Mike every week. You're not Mike.
Oh, okay. I just got to make sure.
No.
My next one was Superman: Secret Origins. This is as I said before, iconic imaging, but there was just those wonderful, great little moments, like when Chloe signed Clark's cast, but it wasn't completely Chloe's signature. They blocked that enough, but you knew who it was. Some of those Legion segments, the details when he's at the high school and just the background with the other kids when he's hearing what they're saying, how he's a weird freak, when he is actually Superman again. Not only just the iconic dun-da-da moment, but when he catches Lois and there's that reflection in the glass window. Little stuff like that just added to my wow moments, my enjoyment of this series. Now, my Oscar goes to Surprise, Surprise, Blackest Night. I really just... How many times when we've talked about it, we talk about the things in the backgrounds and just the little attention to detail on this. And, you see that? That was cool. Oh, that was kind of neat. So for me, the biggest / the best event I've ever read, in my history, that this goes down as my, wow, event and, moment that I was like, this is something that, from this moment on, there's always going to be pre-Blackest Night and post-Blackest Night. I came in on Infinite Crisis. I was there for Final Crisis. Both of those were significant events. I was like, oh, that's kind of neat. This is the one I was like, wow. This is, that moment that kind of like, holy crud kind of stuff.
Jim, my one category that we didn't really discuss was one-shots. I do think there were some interesting one-shots released this year that I think were worth noting. Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen special number 2. This one did something that was rare for me. I was actually scared for the life of Jimmy Olsen. With Mon-El captured, there seemed to be no one to save Jimmy. I have to say that I hope we continue to get more Jimmy Olsen storytelling like this. I'd love to see a couple of these a year, a la his old series. Like maybe a Jimmy Olsen quarterly book, or just even twice a year or something like that. Because I think he lends to a different kind of storytelling. One of the highlights of this year has been the expanded storytelling with Superman's supporting cast. I'd almost like to see a Superman family-style co-feature or a full-blown book back again. But if not, these specials, I think one of the advantages of that is you get this big, huge story in one telling of it. And I just thought it was really cool. And did you feel there was some actual danger for Jimmy?
Oh, definitely. And it's funny because, with Olsen, he's a character that I initially, when they had that whole Jimmy Olsen must die, I was like, yay! And then as that went through, I was like, oh, I'm kind of liking what they're doing with Jimmy. Then they kind of whitewashed everything, but they rebuilt it back up through these one-shots of the whole Jimmy Olsen, pal Superman. I'm like, okay, we're getting back that cool Jimmy Olsen that I wanted to live. Now he's once again in danger, and he doesn't have Superman. He didn't have Mon-El to help him. Like, how's the kid going to make it? And there was definitely, of every member of the Superman family, Olsen could have died. And, it would have, kind of stunk because I was really kind of digging who he was. I'm the guy who likes to see progression and growth and age in the character. And right there, we saw Jimmy grow up and knuckle up and actually, take some steps to being a man.
Yeah, and that was the thing about. I loved him going on this kind of reporters. This is his chance. This is his big story. His chance to crack it, and he went deep undercover, and it was just such a neat little thing to follow. And especially with Mon-El captured, I had no idea what was going to happen to Jimmy, and it was then the one shot, because it had so many extra pages, was just something. It felt like a epic piece, and I really enjoyed that. The Batman Doc Savage first wave kickoff. Doc Savage really was, for me, the star of this pulpy world without superpowered heroes. We saw a very different Batman, not having yet gone through all of the steps we've seen to become the Caped Crusader we know. This feels very Elseworlds to me, so that worked. If it didn't feel Elseworlds, I think I would have had issues with Batman, but because it didn't feel like our world, I was very cool with that. The art was very sharp. I am glad to see DC exploring an other world theme. With concepts like this and Earth 1, it's fun to see these type of character concepts in different settings. There's a ton of room for good pulpy storytelling. Bringing in characters like Batman and Black Canary to give the titles a bit of an initial draw and notice. I'm hoping this works because I think the Spirit is going to work heavily in this world. I liked the previous Spirit series a great deal. I'm glad they're relaunching the concept again with Doc Savage in this kind of world to try and give it some legs again, because I was enjoying what was there before, and I'm hoping that maybe going this route will get these concepts a little bit more notice, because I think there's room for this, and I think it's something that it gives me a different kind of thing. Doc Savage was the star, really. And that was the character that I was the most interested in. He was very cool to read. Do I like this Batman? Well, not really. He's not my Batman, going back to our whole my Batman thing. But I do like that this Batman fits this world. He's an Elseworlds Batman. And, that kind of works for me. So I'm into that. This is not technically a one-shot, but I like the idea. Blackest Night #0, the free comic book day giveaway. And I'm glad they're doing this again this year with the War of the Superman kickoff. Gets people excited to go to the shop for the big event of the summer and beyond. I'm glad to see such support for Free Comic Book Day with an issue that would draw people in where they're like, wow, I've really got to grab this. I think it's good for all of comics because it gets people to walk out with that book, but then also a whole bunch of other titles to kind of, just give a look to it. So I think it's good across the medium to have, your big companies doing these big stories and drawing people in for Free Comic Book Day. I'm hoping. I don't work at a comic shop, so I'm just guessing that it's kind of a good thing for them. The Rebels Annual 2009, we've talked about this multiple times. Very excellent Starro Annual. Very self-contained. Offered a great look at not only Starro, but very important, the dynamics and politics of his minions. And it serves to turn Starro into a very impressive and very scary concept. It's a book that makes me excited, that we're getting the third Green Lantern book with Bedard taking over Green Lantern Corps, because Bedard just seems to be really hitting home runs with this whole Rebels universe for me. I'm into it. It's a different kind of storytelling. It's big space opera. Serialized space opera reminds me of the old Flash Gordon serials and stuff like that, but it's today's storytelling sensibilities with that kind of thing. You got to give writers runs to get this kind of stuff and give art teams a chance to just really do these kind of amazing things, because the Starro Annual for me was a selling point on that series. It was just one of the, I remember calling you right after I read it and said, dude,
yeah.
if you aren't reading this, you have to read this issue.
that annual really saved the series for me. I was getting ready to say, you know what, I don't really need it. I was getting ready to drop it. Then I read that. I was like, wow, this is this is a really cool story. And I went back and I started rereading, the Rebels, and just started after reading that, I was like, man, it re-energized me into that series, and it's now a series that I really do enjoy. It's very strong, very secured, very safe.
I will also say, for anybody, if you're not reading Rebels, and even if you're saying to yourself, I have no intention of reading Rebels, pick up that annual. You don't have to have read any of Rebels to read that annual. It's very contained. It's a very creepy origin for Starro, and changes the concept without disregarding anything that came before. It explains it in there, but it is something that adds to this character. It's a very contained annual. You can read this one. It's a great read. So if you're interested in a good space story, read that. It's a great example of great villain development because there's multiple tangents in there. There's multiple different arcs throughout there. Starro's direct story, but then also each one of his minions are spotlighted. His main generals, so to speak, are spotlighted. And it's very cool. I want to talk about the two annuals, Batman Annual number 27 and Detective Comics Annual number 11. And the reason why I'm putting them together as one-shots, they're the true lead into the Azrael series. I wanted to note that these issues are not only because of that Azrael series, which I'm really enjoying, but the great moments with Renee and Bullock meeting up again after so long, with her being the question now, him back on the force after being off of it. I love this because these are personal character moments that we as longtime fans have not seen in the post-52 world. And I'm so glad they played out here. Nicieza and some amazing artists not only developed the groundwork for the new Azrael, but made this feel very much a part of the whole Bat universe. And those beats, for me, I'm like, wow, he hit on something that we haven't seen on screen yet he knew there are fans that want to see this, that need to see this. I'm one of them. And that made these annuals just pop up to me as something I'm like, wow, thank you very much for noting that these were things that were not seen on screen. And honestly, they could have gone away without showing them, but I love that a writer took the time to show them. I think you know your fan base, it's going to that made me geek out. And I thought that was cool. Superman annuals, I want to talk about Superman annual number 14. Mon-El revealed to be part human, part Kryptonian. How Daxam differed from Krypton in that interbreeding type, in that breeding with other species, and how that over the time led to these different species. Robinson and Pina, it expanded on the whole Mon-El story and gave him a complete hook as to why he's a man of Earth and a man of New Krypton, and yet because of that, his particular origin. And his family origin, alluding to the fact that he is that kid, that one that's part of both. I liked that. That he would have a reason to be Earth's defender because he's one of us. Partially. And it added this whole interspecies thing. It was just a great annual. The Supergirl annual number 1, the origin of Superwoman, and Supergirl having to deal with being outed by humans against Kryptonians, and accidentally revealing a Kryptonian hiding on Earth. She was just trying to blend in with her child, and her rage at Kara, and Kara trying to deal with the politics of which side is right. Is it okay to hide out in Earth society? Should Kryptonians be a separate nation? Should they try to adapt to our society? Should we adapt to them? They're interesting issues that you can tell Kara is mulling over. I like that Lana's there for her. She is there for Clark in his earliest years, and now she's there for Kara. That type of thing was just very cool for me. These last two things are just some quick things I want to note. The Battle for the Cowl had some interesting one-shots exploring all of Gotham City. I'm a fan of this in minis. We talked about this in the Green Lantern Sinestro Corps War, how it was kind of cool to have those one-shots, Cyborg, Superman, and stuff like that. I was glad in Battle for the Cowl that they had one-shots that were kind of exploring the police and exploring Arkham and just exploring these various different areas in Gotham. And those, I'm a fan of that. And so I didn't really have a favorite one-shot of those as much as I liked that we got the bigger picture from that. We got that group that Batgirl and Nightwing had put together, of all the heroes that were associated with the Batman family kind of coming. The network one shot was very cool for me as well. It just added and expanded on that storytelling, and you didn't have to read them, but it was cool if you did, because to me, I can't get enough of a bigger picture in the Bat universe, and that worked. And the last thing I want to note is 80-page Giants and holiday issues this year. And why I want to note them in general, I'm really digging that this is being used to show us some fresh faces in talent at the DC offices. 80-page giants give us new creators, creative spotlights, the JLA, JSA, Batman, these holiday specials, just good funs because there are lots of story for the buck. They're experiments because I'm, kind of told what I was talking about with Wednesday's comics. It's a great chance to see new artists and new writers kind of playing around with these characters in short little stories. And I got to think it's interesting to try and work a complete story into these short little vignettes and make it satisfying, and they work, in most cases. I liked with JLA and JSA that there was like this ongoing thread that interconnected all the stories, but then I liked, the variations in the things that were going on in the 80-page giant and Batman, for example, or those holiday issues. I like these. I'm glad that we periodically get another one of these, and I want to see that continue on this year. I'd like to see more 80-page giants. It's just something where it's a great chance to explore this, and it's a lot of pages, a lot of storytelling for the buck. Are you liking those? I mean, are they books that you're glad you read, or do you not consider them to be a good part of your library, or do you like those when they come out?
Yeah, the specials, the giants, and all that. I really do dig those. Sometimes they are delayed on my reading of them. Especially the special events, the holiday events. I do delay reading those, so I don't read them exactly like the Christmas one. I didn't read exactly at Christmas. It was a little bit afterwards. But I do get to read them, and I do eventually, we talk about like that when the comics come out Thursday. It's not a Thursday read. It's not a Friday read. It may be a couple-week read. But I do get to them, and I do enjoy them. I
agree with you. I will say, like the JLA and the JSA one, I jumped to those right away. And the Batman one as well. The holiday ones, you're right, for some reason they wind up a little further down in my stack. But then when I read them, I'm like, wow, that was really good.
Yeah.
So, there's enough stories. There's a couple in there where, there's always a couple where I'm kind of like, okay, that was entertaining. It didn't give me the same pop that the other ones did. But I like the variety. I appreciate the variety of different explorations and storytelling. The JLA and JSA one in particular, I really liked that it was an ongoing thread. There was a big arcing story in the beginning and a big arcing story in the end, and each of those stories thematically tied into that on some level. Involved the team splitting off or something like that. And that was an interesting way to do that, and I thought it worked. But I like the Batman one as well. It was an interesting 80-page giant, and there was a lot of writers. I know Ivory Madison did a story in there, which I always enjoy her work. We got to see her in a Batman mini previously, and kind of see her involved in this. It's kind of, I don't know, I'm into this kind of stuff, so it's fun. And those were worthwhile. Jim, I got one category, and this is my last one. And these are just kind of honorable mentions in the sense that outside of the DC Universe, Vertigo, Johnny DC, that kind of stuff, just some things. I did kind of a top 10 list, and I didn't really do Wildstorm in this. And it's one of the things like this year, I want to read some more Wildstorm again. I kind of got away from that. I stockpiled some Wildstorm stuff, and then, I kind of like, well, I'm going to go to some trades and some Wildstorm stuff. And it wasn't because I wasn't enjoying it. It was a time issue. A lot of what I found was happening was I was piling up so many books. I'm like, I'm just not getting to these. So I'm like, I'm going to get them in trades because it'll be better to read them in arcs. And I've been doing that, but I want to try this year to read more Wildstorm periodically to kind of talk about them on the show, because I like what they're doing over there. I like their universe concept, especially now that they're doing this switch to rebuilding the society post the whole destruction of it through, what was it, Armageddon, I think it was called. And but here's what I was enjoying in basically Vertigo and Johnny DC. And these are, they are in order actually. Tiny Titans was like my number one book. This one, every time it comes out, it's a Thursday read, which I get my books on Thursday. I grab and read that one almost immediately. It's definitely in my top 5 stack every time it comes out. It's always fun. It's always enjoyable. It always gets me to smile and laugh. It's just a great book. Number 2.
Yeah, Titans, man. I tell you, it's, what? I got a cosign on just the love of Tiny Titans. I was, the fan of that Titans Go, and when they were getting rid of that to replace Tiny Titans, I was like, okay, what are we going to get here? This book is, I have really bad days at work. I come home, I read Tiny Titans, and I feel good. It's the thing that I can read before the other stuff just to clear my head of the negativity so I can go on and I can enjoy my reading and I can enjoy my books that I have out there. This is an amazing, fun, wonderful read that I am just so glad is around.
My number 2 book is Billy Batson and the Magic of Shazam. This is a book that it got back on a regular schedule now. Art Baltazar and Franco are doing the writing on it. I think Mike Kunkel is going to be doing some of the issues somewhere down the line. I think when I originally read them, I don't know if it's officially transitioned completely over to Art and Franco, because I haven't seen Mike Kunkel on the book in a long time. But I got to say, jumping right off of what Jeff Smith did, Mike Kunkel did, Art and Franco are picking up, and it's the density and the depth of this book. It's just a great story, and there's a lot of meat to it, and it's really showing just how fun the Shazam world is. And it's accessible, it's all ages, but it's an interesting and depth-filled story. And they're great characters to follow, and they're so strongly developed. Billy and Mary, I love the differences between the two. I love that it's fun to follow them. The Wizard and Talkie Tawny, and they're bringing in all of the great concepts. And their Black Adam is very interesting. And it just works. The whole thing. I love that he's working at the station, and that he's got a little bit of a crush on the woman, and but then she's got a crush on Captain Marvel, thinking that he's like an adult, which he's really not. I love that kind of stuff. Works for me. It's just a cool book, and it's my number 2 book.
Yeah, dude, I tell you, this book has got me into wanting to read the Captain Marvel, the regular DCU series that was around before. Definitely, got the Jeff Smith version of it. I read it after, this kind of got me going, okay, I want to read that. And it's reintroduced me to the Marvel family. I never really got the whole zone of that everyone said, oh, it's so great about Billy being that he's this little kid and he becomes the hero. And I never really understood people's love of that. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, it'd be kind of, I guess, interesting. Reading this, I get the people's enjoyment of it, and I get why people dig, what is the Marvel family, and definitely this is a Johnny DC title that's got me interested in the DCU.
Number 3 that hit me was House of Mystery. Matthew Sturgis on this book. It's a great read. I'm loving and willing. I know Willingham has done story work on this as well, but what is thematically what I'm enjoying about this book is I love that there's this overarching theme with the people who are trapped in the house, our regular cast members, but then you'll have these visitors that come into the bar and they tell this story. And I love that the story takes the book in a whole different tangent. And it's like what I liked about books about Sandman and stuff like that. You never know what you're going to get from House of Mystery. It's creepy. It's fun. I love that the house is alive, that there is a personification of the house. And I love that the girl's main... I don't want to give away too much on it, because if you're not reading this book, you should be. But it is... I love that this girl has this blueprint of it in her head because she drew it. And she's kind of guiding them through the whole place because, it's a fun read. And I love that everybody who's in there are from different eras of history. And I love the one guy is a dragon who can be in human form. It's just wacky stuff happens every time you turn around. The one girl in the one issue had no back because of a horrible accident that happened to her. Yet she was still eating. Which left for a cleanup in aisle 3. But it's interesting stuff, and it's a cool book, and the characters are visually engaging and entertaining. It's something I'd love to see go to a series or something. It's definitely it should be an HBO series because it's fun and interesting.
Now, do you have my list in front of you? Did I leave it there? Because I'm going through check yes.
Oh, so you got this on your kind of outside of the DCU list?
Dude,
okay.
Man, one of my kind of whatnot categories was stuff outside of the DCU, and so far you've been going down the list exactly how I have it down.
I feel like we never get to this, and I wanted to talk about some of this stuff. Next one be, and this is a definite hard decision for me. I put Jack of Fables before Fables, and what put it over, it was really tough because honestly it was Fables had the edge. But then Jack went out when they switched from Jack Horner to his son, and they turned this into this adventure book that I'm just loving. Like, Jack Frost is now the lead character, and he's cool to read. I love seeing month after month his adventure stories, and he's a fun hero to follow. His dad was so unlikable, and that was fun to read in his series before. I loved the book before, but this kind of twisted it all around, and all of a sudden we got this likable character who wants to be an adventurer and go around saving people and doing what's right. And I love that about him. It's kind of a fun, just interesting exploration of the Fables world. And then Fables, and I almost put these two in the same category, and I almost kind of want to, came right afterwards. This year I loved Witches, which is currently, what I've been reading. But before the Great Fables crossover between the two, this whole thing with the literals, and it led to the literals miniseries, the whole Fables world, dude, I'm reading this Cinderella from Fabletown with Love as well. The whole Fables world to me is just incredibly interesting, and I love that these fairy tale characters, that they play off of what would they really be like in our world, and how would they really react to our world, and what would their flaws be in our world, like what would be their characterizations that we see in human society. And it's very cool to see how they would take advantage of certain things in our world and make it work. And I love that. I mean, the whole idea of the literals, and that they were writing the stories, and now that the literals are gone, they've got kind of like this freedom to kind of live lives like we would. And what is it going to be like for them to do that? It's fun. It's a good read. It's a good story. They deal with some real human issues and some human development issues that we all face all the time. They deal with it in a way that works for these characters, and there's a lot of morality to their stories, and a lot of commentary on what's just wrong with people too in these stories. And I like it. It's the Fables world is just fun. If you've never jumped on it, it's all traded, and that's the great thing I love about Vertigo is their trade program is just absolutely amazing, and the stories they read very well in arcs. I do a lot of times. When I get busy, I talked about in the beginning, my Wildstorm stuff got behind. Vertigo I do tend to put some of my favorite Vertigo titles sometimes on the back burner because I actually like reading them 2 or 3 issues at a time, and sometimes the whole arc at a time, because they read really well that way. And that isn't a negative on those books. I'm not putting them there because they don't belong on my pull list. I'm putting them there because I'm going to read them. I want to read them. And these books that I'm putting in order here, they're ones I go to right away when I'm ready to. I want to talk about the book Unwritten. Did you pick up this book, Jim?
Unwritten? No.
This is one of my books, right after Fables would be my next favorite Vertigo title. One of the things I really liked about this is it kind of plays off of the whole Harry Potter thing, but in this case it's what would be if Harry Potter's dad, the guy who wrote the book, turns out to be J.K. Rowling in this case, but let's pretend that she's a guy. And J.K. Rowling created a character like Harry Potter, but it turns out it's based on her son, and people are wondering whether or not he's really the real character or not. And so it takes that whole concept. So it's not Harry Potter, don't get me wrong, but you can see the connections to it. So what happens if all of a sudden this character starts experiencing things that makes the people around him and him wonder if all of it was real or some of it was real? And it's bleeding over. And what if the stories were based on reality that this guy doesn't know about? Or are the stories leading to events happening in reality that we don't understand why the stories are leading to this? It's a mystery that's been developing all the way through that I'm still kind of like trying to wrap my head around what's real and what's not. And did this guy actually experience these stories? Because he's running into the characters from the story, but they're people in our world. And some of them seem to know something about what's been happening to him, but they're not completely revealing themselves. So I'm completely engaged by the whole thing. There's a mystery element to it that I'm finding fun, and it's just a great book. And it's something that if you haven't picked it up, it's it's in trade now. The first trade, go grab it because it's cool. Next off of that, I want to talk about it. Going back to Johnny DC again, fun books for me. Super Friends. I'll be honest with you. I read the first issue of this. I enjoyed it. I picked up the trade for my classroom. What I did is I read it first, and then I took it to my classroom. And I am reading this in trade. I'm reading it in trade, then I'm taking it to my classroom and giving it to my students. Fun, accessible, kind of today cartoony fun. It's not slapstick, kind of like Tiny Titans is, so it's a different category. And that's not, I don't mean that in any way. Tiny Titans is one of my favorite books it's my favorite book outside of DC Universe, actually, on our list. This one, though, is it's very different take in the sense that these are true heroes. Kind of like, you know what, I guess I'm not wording it the way I want to. We were talking about Barry Allen, how bright and accessible Barry Allen is. This is kind of like taking that and kicking it up to 11, which is good for kids. Superman feels like a hero. Batman feels like a hero. He smiles. This is a great jumping on point for getting kids to know these characters without having to worry about, are they going to, and they do bring in villains that are, typical to the Justice League. It teaches what's good about teamwork, which a lot of times kids nowadays, and this isn't any knock, just speaking for myself as a teacher, with DSs and technology and all that, they don't interact and have play dates as much as they used to. This story teaches the importance of friendship and trust and teamwork and working together and being a good part of a team. Teaches like self-motivation skills and stuff like that. And as an adult, I read it and enjoyed it immensely. It's something that I think as an adult, if you're a fan of accessible superhero storytelling like that, you can read it. It's fun. It's bright. I got enjoyment out of it. But I also got enjoyment because I could see giving this to a kid and saying, hey, and I do. My students love it. It's a great book. So it's something, I'm glad I'm reading it because I'm enjoying talking to them about these characters and what's great about them from a way that is very accessible to them. And it's kind of cool in an age where they're playing a lot of violent things. And, I'm not anti that. I think we need to educate them about that stuff. But it's great for them to have things that are, bright and fun and accessible and engaging to talk about that they get into. My kids love this book. So it's kind of a great read, and I'm into it too. Batman Brave and the Bold. I love this cartoon, and as the years gone on, I stopped reading the comic, then I got back into reading the comic because I started enjoying the cartoon again, and I gotta say, the comic really has gotten very, very good. It matches the cartoon, so if you're into I'll basically say this, if you're into the Brave and the Bold cartoon and you haven't picked up the comic book series, pick it up. If you don't like the Brave and the Bold cartoon, you're probably going to feel the same way about the comic book series because it's new stories set in the cartoon universe. So if you're like, you need more fix each month. It's like another episode every month of the cartoon, and I'm liking that because I love the cartoon. So for me, I give it the highest possible recommendation to anybody out there that enjoys the cartoon because you will enjoy this equally for the same reasons. The last book on my list, I wanted to stop at 10. Madame Xanadu. Madame Xanadu, Matt Wagner, Amy Reeder Haley. We had Michael William Kaluta doing that story this year. And I want to commend the whole year of the series because I love following her history through time. I love that she started out as this girl, this magical little girl in the past, and then we've seen her grow over time, and how she's had to face changing eras and society's changing views. Sometimes she has to hide her magic, and when she's found out, she becomes in danger, and the people around her do. Other times, she uses it as a quirk where she becomes kind of a sage, or the person that people seek out, for fortune telling and things like that. So it's interesting to see how her role changes from era to era. And the artwork changes, and her visual presentation changes accordingly because she would dress differently and act differently and be surrounded by different people. And I've just enjoyed this book. I think it's a great read. I've liked the use when Phantom Stranger was appearing in it. I've liked his use in the series. I think it's it's definitely not set in the DC universe, but it's great to see this character kind of told in this kind of universe, and it's a great example of what Vertigo is. And I stopped in my top 10. There are other books that I'm enjoying outside of the DC universe, a lot of other books I'm enjoying outside of there, but I'm like, I got to stop somewhere and let me just put this in order as a top 10 list. And that's my top 10 outside DC universe right now, books that just really in 2009 grabbed me.
Yeah, if you kick Madame Xanadu up to up the list, where right above the Jack of Fables and the Fables thing, it rotates the spot between sometimes House of Mystery, it edges House, sometimes it's right below House, depending on what's going on in each of the two stories. You got my list as well, pretty much. As you're going down, I'm like, yeah, okay, because with me, I really only went out through Madame Xanadu.
Cool. Jim, do you have anything else that you...
Well, I got a couple others. I got two others. One, it's the editors. I really, this year I started noticing there was a couple editorial teams that they were on a lot of titles I liked. They were on a lot of titles that were kind of interconnected. And I was like, you know what? Yes, creative team does do something to keep the continuity going, to keep these different characters appearing in different books, having them have the same feel to it. But it's not just creative team. You got to give some props to editorial teams. And I kind of have a top 3 teams that I just want to, give some recognition to. First up, we have from the Batman families, Mike Martz and Janelle Siegel. We constantly talk about just how these characters feel the same, how they, we're definitely getting the same kind of Gordon, we're getting the same Barbara, the usage of the different characters, and it's just something that, yes, we're rebuilding the Bat universe with a new Batman, and we have some solid continuity going on here, and it was something I was like, yeah, this is a really cool time to be a Batman fan. Next up, we have Matt Idelson, Will Moss with the Superman family. Just like with the Bat family, we have this great interconnection. We're seeing multiple styles, variations, and characters, but it's still the same character. It's still the same scope, the same dynamic, the same Superman universe. And we really have, you think about it, we have a Superman universe where Superman is really off Earth, but these Superman titles still have that same Superman feel to them. They still feel like it's, he's part of all of it, even though he's not, Clark Kent is physically not appearing in the titles.
Also, from one book to the other, they thematically play off of events from each other.
Yeah.
There are events that will happen in one that it makes sense for it to influence it. Even in issue 12 of World of New Krypton, one of the things that I loved, and this is a combination, I'm sure, to editorial and the writer as well, in the sense that they had on the screen Starro on the face of aliens. And it made sense with the way they were traveling with Adam Strange that would appear in World of New Krypton. Just quickly in the back, just something that gives the whole universe feel. And that's something that I think is on the writers and the editorial to make those decisions. And art, I don't know who makes that call to throw those things in there. But I loved that thematically the events that were going on with Nightwing and Flamebird were affecting Mon-El, were affecting Supergirl. And even if we saw just something on a TV in a background or something like that, I just think that interconnectivity is fantastic. The Bat books, going back to what you were saying with them, there is not a single Bat book this year that I would have dropped. They were just great. It was great to see that whole world and how it was spinning out of Battle for the Cowl, and the fact that really not a Battle for the Cowl, R.I.P. We lost Batman. R.I.P. Final Crisis. We lost Batman, and now the Bat universe has to deal with it. And the world changed, and it was so interesting to see so many people affected by that I adored that. I thought it was just fantastic how that all came together. And you're right. That's it's editorial making great decisions on teams, putting them together, coordinating, and that's interesting stuff. I want to know more about editorial and what they do. And as a reader, I do and I don't, in the sense that my biggest compliment I can give to everybody who works on comics, for creative and all that, I want to read your work. I want to read and enjoy your work. I want to look at the art, and I want to do that. And that's kind of more than even the behind-the-scenes stuff, in the sense like I don't get into whole, like, let's find out who doesn't like this person or anything like that. I don't get into that kind of stuff. I like knowing what it's like creatively to work on a comic. I love those conversations when we've had him on the show. And ultimately because I want to know what it takes to put together this work that I enjoy so much. Because I just want to enjoy the comics. I want to get in and really dig into this. This is an escape for me, an entertainment medium. It's like what television and movies are and video games and stuff like that to people. It is my escape from it all. It's my stress break. So comics are that moment. They don't add stress to me ever. They take it away. And they're there for me in such an important place, in such an important role. And creators of this medium do so much for me because of that. And it is because editors put together great creative teams that just kind of get it. And, they work to change things up when it's necessary to make a book tighter. And I think good editors do that. And it's something I would love to know more of what an editor does, in the sense that I would like to know more about how the comic creation goes about. But like I said, I don't get into all the gossipy rumors and that type of stuff. I do get into knowing what people's jobs are and how they benefit the product. That to me is interesting. And I do want to know more about that from editors. So I'm sorry, Batman and Superman and...
My Oscar goes to, and I don't think this will be a surprise to anybody, Eddie Berganza, Adam Schlegman, Green Lantern, Blackest Night.
I think it's Schlagman, but I might be wrong.
Schlagman?
I could be butchering it too.
However it's pronounced, they're doing a wonderful job.
I agree.
This is, we talk about just how this is a universal event, and I've said, multiple times tonight that this is how I want events to run. This is a great, just interconnectability of the events with all the things going on. Yes, a lot of it does, go on, credit to Jeff Johns for crafting this, but he can't be doing this alone. He's got it, and I know this is what probably editors are dealing with. They're probably, helping with the coordination, with the focus of what is going on, the dealings with just the minis, the tie-ins, the various whatnots behind the event that is making this thing run the way I want it to run. This is a hoorah kind of cool stuff that I'm enjoying, why I'm enjoying this so much.
Cool.
Now, I do have one final category. It's my hoorah moment of the year. And I always have trouble with this because there's so many cool villain moments and I never give it to the villain moment because I read comic books because I want it's the hero. I want to cheer for the hero, and I love those heroic moments. So this year I decided to make a separate category, the villain hoorah moment of the year. So I have my hero moments and I have my villain moments, and I'm going to start off with the villain moments. Now, the villain moments this year gave us me some wonderful, I love this kind of moments. Jason Todd, as not only as Red Hood, but as the evil Batman in Battle for Kyle, gave me some wonderful Jason Todd moments that, I really enjoyed. I enjoyed seeing him go into it, and it kind of accentuated who the character was because you got a little bit more depth, kind of a little bit more insight into why this kid is so messed up the way he is. And it was because in the end there you kind of see him as the disturbed little boy that he really didn't win out in my hoorah villain moments, but it's definitely noteworthy when talking about really cool villainous moments. I also have the various deaths in Blackest Night. These have been just oh my god, oh, I can't believe they did that. With Donna dealing with her evil baby, just everything she had to go through in the mini. The probably my favorite death in Blackest Night, we technically didn't even really see. It was Superboy Prime. With the Adventure Comics. We didn't really see his death, but I'm assuming that's what happened because it was a great way they showed it he finally meets up with his girlfriend that he thought was long dead. No, she's alive, and then you see that little hope. And she's a Black Lantern about to rip his heart out. I was like, oh, that's a beautiful death. But the winner in my villainous moments, and in a way it's almost unfair to kind of give them the Oscar, seeing as they're villains with their own title. But it was more difficult to pick which was my favorite villainous moment from Secret Six, because we had some really cool stuff with Junior torturing Bane with bricks and killing the priest. We had some of those cool Catman moments, especially where you see Geraldo Sanchez how to torture the man that murdered his little daughter Kate. But I'm pretty sure you guys won't be surprised by what I picked for my Oscar for the villainous moment of the year, and that is, of course, the Just 30 Seconds. I love that sequence. I made it a musical. Come on. It was just something that just captivated me visually as well as words. I talked about how, the Secret Six won that, moment in the Oscars for me. The artwork, just because of that look that she had.
Was your musical bit supposed to come after this?
Yes. This is where the musical
because I know we went on that tangent earlier on, and we didn't. I knew you did not plan it to be there.
No, this is exactly where it was going to come in. I was going to lead into it and then go into it and, say, I had various things how I was going to, tie into it. But, this is where it was going to come in. But you set it up so well where you're like, do you have a musical category? Like, funny you should mention that.
I was joking.
Yeah.
I never thought that you had a musical category.
Yeah. Well, it was weird because it really did start off as a joke.
Right.
And then as I started thinking about it, I was like, yeah, this is kind of neat. And that's when I really, because you asked me, like, how long did you go into that? When I first initially came up with it, it wasn't that long, and then I started thinking about it. And even as I was explaining it to you, you're like, yeah, that kind of fits. It kind of works. And then when I saw that Music Maestro episode on Brave and the Bold, I was like, yeah, this is kind of the deal here. It is. So it went from being a joke to being a serious category to being a bit of a funniness, enjoyable part of what I bring to the show. So it's to say, was it a joke? Yes. To say, was it serious? Yes. It was one of those things where, as I was developing it, as I was doing it, I was like, this kind of makes sense.
It was seriously a joke.
Yes. Okay, on to my heroic hoorah moments. Now, anytime the Green Lantern Corps knuckles up, I cheer. It's those great moments, and this is throughout any of the stuff where, when they're doing their oath, and when they're doing the oath as a group, that one cool scene where all the different colors were doing their oaths at the same time, and you get to Larfleeze going, huh? Kind of stuff. I always just get jazzed up with it's the whole combination of military police force type deal where they're just getting ready. It's time to be a hero. Charge up and rock and roll. I always cheer that. Other times were the secret origin stuff. When you're dealing with those iconic type images with Clark opening up the shirt and you see the uniform, I cheered, I giddied, I was like, yay! And same deal with Wonder Woman. She had some great moments. For me, it was it's a combination of a little bit on the sick side, but then you see that really cool Wonder Woman moment when she was dealing with genocide and rips the lasso out of her, but then goes after genocide to try to save her. Because she's not just this monster that's going to kill her. She's going to be the hero. And it was that combination of stuff that was like, yeah, that kind of deal.
I don't know if anybody else had the same question mark when you said you did it was great when Clark had that moment where he ripped open his shirt and it was like, then you said the same thing with Wonder Woman. I'm sitting here I'm like, what? Where are you going with this? I'm like, really? Then you totally started going with it. I'm like, what you said was fantastic. I'm not disputing it. It was just, I did like a double take when you said same thing with Wonder Woman. I'm like, where is he? What book are you reading? I'm like, it was like a 2-second thing, and then I'm like, I know where he's going. It's very cool where he's going with this. So I just thought it was funny. I thought it was funny.
Now my Oscar goes to, surprise, surprise, a scene out of Blackest Night. Now the scene that actually the very specific moment, it came in Blackest Night number 5. It's actually a relatively kind of small line if you think about everything that's going on, but it's always struck a chord for me. I know I've brought it up multiple times when we're discussing it. It's when Barry is in the police station, and the police are saying, hey, people are calling. What should we tell them? Tell them stay indoors and keep calm. Tell everyone who calls to do the same thing, and tell them the Justice League is on this. I still just love that moment. Not only does it further show, Barry as this bastion of hope, it was just such a cool hero moment that, not only he's got his doubts, he's got his stuff that he's got to deal with. There's so much pressure going on, but he knows that person needs that hope. He knows they need to know that the Justice League is on this. Don't worry, we got this. This is our deal. We'll take care of it. I raved about this multiple times. I just love this moment, and I'm always drawn back to this moment as being probably the point when I really said, wow, Barry's cool. Okay, I'm kind of digging this guy. I want to see who he is. And
I want him on the Justice League.
Yeah, I want him there. I can't wait for the Flash title. I can't wait to really get into it. And it was just, as I said, it's one small line, one small part from this event, but it really struck a chord with me as to what the nature of a hero should do. We always talk about how the heroes got to go above and beyond, how they always, it's not just, beat up the bad guys. You got to keep the civilians safe. You got to protect the innocent. You got to, the truth, justice, the American way, the various things that make these heroes heroes. Right there, that simple sentence right there. Bam! I was like, dang, that's cool.
Anything else?
I think that's it.
You just hesitated there. Like, what?
I had to make sure.
That was great. Jim, for our next few episodes, we'll do this episode, and then let's come back a little bit sooner because we have this. I've got a bunch of Speeding Bullet stuff I want to talk about, and we'll do kind of a quote unquote mini show. So we'll come back a little sooner than a week with that. Talk about some Speeding Bullets books and things like that. And we'll get to those listener voicemails and stuff that we wanted to get to that time-wise. There's no way we're going to get to it because this went more than we expected. So we'll get that. We'll do Speeding Bullets, listeners of recent material, and then listener voicemails. And we'll do that as kind of a mini show. And then right after that, it's JLA Avengers. We're bumping that up a little bit because we're going to be recording with Kent Hare this weekend. So that'll get us actually a few little episodes in the can. So we'll be a little ahead of the game again, which will be a comfortable position for us and have that content ready to go when it's time. So it's got next two episodes planned, and that's what they're going to be. We're still doing all the content we've said. We just we have an opportunity to record with Kent, so seeing as we have it, we're going to do it and release it. So that will be our next two shows. We'll have a little mini show and then JLA Avengers.
Look at those strange little beetles. They look... Great neutron!
Check out RagingBullets.com. There's a lot of work going on RagingBullets.com. I've converted it over to a WordPress site to make it easier to do more regular updates and things like that. And hopefully in the future for people that write columns and blogs and things for the show, that they'll be able to have their own logins and access and just kind of make the site a little bit easier and more user-friendly for us to create content for it. I want to talk about Ty Tyner. Friend of the show, Ty Tyner, is being nice enough to create a new template for the website. So you're going to see a whole brand new look, even to the one that's up right now, that's going to be popping up in the next couple weeks. So I want to thank Ty Tyner for taking the time to do that. It was nice of him to offer to kind of rework our site for us. It's very cool for him to create a WordPress template. So that's RagingBullets.com, always updated multiple times during the week. I want to also shout out our forum. We have a wonderful forum community, and if you haven't joined our forum, it's a great the comic forum site is wonderful because it connects you to a lot of different podcasts. So you do one login and you get to connect to a whole bunch of podcasts, and we've got a wonderful, rich community. I want to thank all of our listeners that just do such a great job of starting up new threads and concepts and ideas up there. It's great that our listeners outside of the show, just with their own thoughts, are throwing up discussions, and they can be DC discussions or anything around comics or fandom. I love discussion points going on just about anything you want to chat about. So the forum's open to that. It's a fun, friendly community, and it's all about just geeking out about the things we're all enjoying. So that's our comic forum, and I want to thank the Comic Geek Speak guys for running and maintaining that forum as well. It's really, really great. We love your voicemails. It's 1-440-388-4434 or Dr. Norge on Skype, and please consider sending them in. We will be having those actually on the next episode. We'll definitely be having listener voicemails. We wanted to have them on this part, but Jim and I went a lot longer than we expected, so we're doing the next episode is going to be speeding bullets and voicemails specifically to make sure we get those in before we jump into JLA Avengers. So it's a great chance to get those thoughts in. Our sponsors for this episode are DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Over at DCBService.com, you can pick up the Flash #1 on that special discount, which includes a free Flash ring. Regularly $3.99, 50% off, only $1.99. The Flash races out of Blackest Night into his own monthly series as the all-new adventures of the fastest man alive starts with Case 1, The Dastardly Death of the Rogues. Barry Allen runs back into his life in Central City, but when one of the rogues turns up murdered under mysterious circumstances, it's up to the Flash not only to solve this bizarre crime, but to protect those that are still targeted by the elusive killer. Plus, don't miss a peek into the future of the Flash universe in this special, extra-sized starting point issue. This is great. If you haven't been reading the Flash before, it's a great chance to jump on board and get on the ground floor of what is so cool about the Flash world. I've been loving Rebirth, and I'm ready for a Flash series now. It's Rebirth as every issue's come out. It's gotten better and better and more like what I'm used to from Flash storytelling. And anybody who's reading Blackest Night, the relationship between Barry and Hal, we're finally seeing a Barry that's likable and exciting and interesting to follow, so I'm really excited to follow that character. DCBService.com. Check out that issue at that great discount, $1.99 for a $3.99 book. Episode 198. 2 episodes from now, it's going to be JLA Avengers, the trade paperback. We're going to be joined by a friend of the show, Kent Hare. The once-in-a-lifetime crossover that brought 2 super teams together and rocked the comics world is at last available in trade paperback. Own the entire 4-issue co-publishing event between DC and Marvel, written by Kurt Busiek, art by George Perez. This collaboration also includes introductions by Original Avengers writer-editor Stan Lee and Justice League of America editor Julia Schwartz. 208 pages, $19.99 regularly, 47% off, only $10.59. I want to thank DCBService.com and our friends over at InStockTrades.com for the wonderful support of the show. And we will see you in a few days with our Speeding Bullets listener email show.
Bye!
Jim, what kind of a podcast are we?
We are the Raging Bullets Show. We are the Raging Bullets Show. We are a spoiler podcast that covers the DCU. We are the Raging Bullets Show. We go in depth with the books on the show, with a plot line, story, twist, and whatnot, you know. So if you haven't read them, come back later, you know. So, oh! The first scoop ever out of the thing.
Do you want to
And I know
redo
you're
it?
still recording.
Do you want to do it? Do you want to redo it?
Well, sure.
Okay, give me 1 second.
Ugh.
It's funny when we're doing the show, sometimes because I'm the host, I'll start looking for things on the internet based off a comment that Jim and I had, or pull something up on my computer because I want to make sure to get facts straight or things like that. And I'll be trying to listen to him and doing that. And then it was when we were doing this episode, one of the books that I wanted to make sure that we talked about was the Final Crisis Legion of Three Worlds story. And it was funny, I had that so focused on my head that I was listening to Jim's comments about Superman's Secret Origin, and for some reason I started clicking into things I wanted to talk about with that, so I thought Jim went there because I was looking something up at the same time, so I started going on a tangent about Legion of Three Worlds that had nothing to do with what he was talking about. It was funny, and actually the comments that I made are very relevant for Final Crisis Legion of Three Worlds, so I thought this is great blooper reel stuff. So it's not just that I'm picking on Sensei, it's fun to throw on some of my own goof-ups as well, but this was a tangent that we went on that really had no relevance to the conversation we were having at the time, but yet has some real heartfelt comments on a book that I thought was really excellent in Legion of Three Worlds. Yeah, that was one of those, talk about one that I forgot to put in my list. That was a great series. I think I forgot that one because of its release schedule.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was a great series. I loved the ending of it. Every issue when it came out had a pop to it. It was beautiful. And certainly, it had so many great moments of bringing back not only Bart, but we got to see Connor as well from this whole thing. It was a very big event that visually, you're right, had so many characters that were done right. Not even just the characters, the museum sequences were also visually stunning because we got to see gadgets and gizmos and things from characters past and accessories and just fine details. A great series. I'm glad you brought that one up because that was one, you're right, that was under my radar. When I was going through categories, I did not think of that one. And I should have, especially with all the other Final Crisis stuff that I covered.
Dude, I said Superman Secret Origins, not
I'm totally off on another tangent, aren't I? That's what happens when I'm doing too many things at once. That's funny.
Outstanding. But I gotta agree with you.
This is good blooper reel stuff.
The Legion of Three Worlds, that actually would be another good one to have some stuff in there. And I got to co-sign what you thought about that. Definitely some of the details when we got to see him with his Legion and just some of those moments that I got to co-sign that agreement.
It's further proof that when sometimes when we're doing the show, I'm doing stuff to get ready for the wrap up.